It says replay is on though.
No, right now the room is you see, it's placed up. I mean next time, because the room is open, you can't change it.
Oh, before the room open, I can change it. Okay, got it. That means, Tyler, you just schedule, but before the room open, I will just click on the replay on, and then you will on. Maybe I will try. Thank you, baby.
Thank you.
I like your glasses.
See?
Sure. Tyler, rainy season is in full effect. Ever since you left on Saturday, the skies have been crying.
I've heard.
Oh.
Yesterday and today have been just dreary. I'm like, what's going on? But no,
He
we'll
brought the
deal with
sun
it.
with him then.
I was just going to say that he brought a little of the sun here. You
It
can
wasn't.
nearly see the sky.
Yeah, yesterday.
What?
Yesterday it was not bad actually.
Yeah, thanks,
A
Tyler,
sunny
for
day in
bringing the
Stockholm
sun.
in November?
No,
Come
it wasn't
on.
sunny. It just wasn't dreary and cold and rainy.
Want to see the sky? I said, let's not exaggerate.
Yeah.
I'll still
There are
credit you,
levels
Tyler.
to this. Yeah.
Okay. So happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome back.
Ehon.
There's plenty of new news. The live stream is pinned at the top of the Twitter account, TNATW.
Yeah.
And just scanning through the audience to see who's tardy. But Cheryl can help the tardy kids. Okay. So
I've got a breaking news though.
Go ahead.
Germany, it was 1 hour ago. Germany emergency services numbers 112, 110 all suffered from widespread outage. So the emergency numbers of the police and the fire departments are not working in a large parts of Germany. The cause of the outage is still not known. That's all. So they are still investigating at the moment.
Okay.
But if you're in Germany, yeah, you can probably come out and let us know what's the situation later.
And then before we get into the headlines, Lakeisha, if you can say more about Pete, because Myanmar was in the news yesterday that the UN says there was 2 million people desperately in need of aid, as if, that they usually say that, meaning if they don't get aid, you're going to have 2 million casualties due to famine or lack of water or something. So, which, I mean, us living in Thailand and me having Burmese team members at my place, I'm familiar with how severe things are in parts of Myanmar. So I wonder if Pete might jump in.
Yeah,
sure.
And I think it's better if he just speaks directly. But and then if he's too modest, I'll fill in the pieces.
Thanks, Lakeisha. Thanks, Tyler and Cheryl. I think you guys are doing a great job. There's about 55 million people in Myanmar, and in 8th of November last year, 83% of them voted for a democracy. And on the 1st of February this year, the military junta generals took control of the country. They've got 500,000 soldiers that are paid about $150 a month, and they've got guns, and the other guys don't. So it's a coup d'état. They've taken control of the country, and the numbers for deaths, they've done very well with their PR to make the world think there's only been maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people killed. We think the numbers are probably closer to 10 to 20,000, and detentions more than that. It's very nasty what's going on over there. They're fighting back with slingshots, and more recently they've been capturing guns. It looks like Pol Pot all over again. We built a wallet app to try and solve the financial inclusion problem, to get them from 5 million people with bank accounts, which is less than 10%, up to about 15 to 20 million, depending on what you count. But that's nothing compared to the health situation. They're ranked about 200th. They're on the bottom of the ranking list. There's lots of countries that aren't ranked, but they're on the bottom, literally on the bottom of the list globally on the health system. And depending on the independent NGO analysis you're seeing now, there's somewhere between 2 million and 3.4 million that have been displaced or likely to go into severe poverty. They have a thing they call the four cut strategy, where they cut out access to the internet. So most parts of the country have had no internet, to suppress communication. They suppress food, water, and health. So they even weaponized COVID by controlling access to medicine and oxygen. So it's a fun place right now. We and about another 300 people from Myanmar fled to Thailand. There are about 5 million people in Thailand from Myanmar. For those of you that don't know where it is, it's sort of between China, India, Bangladesh on the west, Laos on the northeast, and Thailand on the east. And it's been isolated for 50 years because of military control, and they were just gradually getting towards a real democracy. So it's pretty wild times over there, and we need the international support and awareness. Please tell your friends.
And then, could you comment on the why this coup happened, and it kind of came out of nowhere rather suddenly, or?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk about the. You probably would have heard about the Rohingya crisis, which is
Sure.
the Muslim minority, predominantly Muslim minority on the west side near Bangladesh. And a lot of those people have been, there for a very, very long time. We're talking generations. But there was a growth, and some of the nationalists, the sort of hard right nationalists, led by this military leader that now is here, now has taken control. He was leading the suppression of other minority groups previously, so including some nationalist Chinese on the northeast border, and then he led and it is genocide. It was absolutely genocide. There's no doubt about it. He led the genocide against them. This is just a few years ago, and it's no surprise to anyone that he then used that power rush to take control of the country. What is quite saddening is that the newly elected democratic leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, who's now in her 70s and loved by the country, they call her mother, she's been imprisoned by him. And basically she was trying to walk this tightrope with the international community. She was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize and then sort of had it taken away again because she was having to sort of compromise her own sort of position to keep this tentative track towards democracy, but that's just been completely thrown away now. So most of the Democratic Party, it's called the NLD, has been in jail, and I could go on for ages. So let's not dwell on it. But I hope that addresses some of the points.
And just a little bit of extra background about Pete. So he was CIO of KBZ Bank, which is, I believe, the largest bank in Myanmar. And so when we talk about fintech and digital or financial inclusion, particularly to people in developing parts of the world, he has extensive background, as well as having coached some unicorns. So I'm really, really glad. Pete, you need to fill out your background. Okay, I'll stop there.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. So what we're going to do is we always do. Welcome back and happy Thursday, November 11th, everybody. Here comes that sound. And here comes the headlines. So the top story today is that YouTube starts hiding public dislike counts on videos to keep smaller creators. Why do you think they're hiding the dislike number? Anyone want to wager a guess as to why they're hiding dislikes now?
Mental stress?
For why? What do you mean mental stress?
Well, I think maybe people's mood will be affected if they see too many people who don't like them. I don't know. I'm not a creator, so I don't know how you feel that.
I'm assuming, Tyler, they just want to have more creators, and it's hard to become a successful creator if everyone dislikes your
You
account.
feel very down, yeah.
So they
Precisely.
How do you
create
feel?
artificial support.
Correct. So it's to keep smaller creators or newbie creators from being targeted by dislike attacks And more specifically, you notice on TikTok, there's no dislikes. It's just all likes. And the young kids love the TikTok because they get nothing but, little likes and hearts and kisses. And the when young people are starting off on the web, it's a common phenomenon that most people who fancy themselves to become kind of creators of any kind,
Or
do
get some
anything.
bullying,
Yeah,
right?
well, there are haters on the internet who are angry at themselves, and they hate themselves, so they project that onto every piece of content they engage with. They're going to be very nasty about it, and a lot of people have never encountered such people, and they're not used to being hated, and they can't handle it, and then they are not able to pursue their career as a creator. If you're going to be a creator on the web, you have to have a very thick skin, because there's a whole lot of haters out there. I mean, a whole ton, and they will find you and they will DM you. And yeah, that's part of the game, and a lot of people can't handle that. And I think this is partly why TikTok has had a breakaway success, because, and to some degree Instagram as well, there's no, well, on Instagram they can comment, and I'm sure people get a lot of haters on there. Twitch also is trying to reduce the hate in the comments, but all of that, just a one-sided affection on TikTok, I think is very interesting, and then I'm not surprised to see it coming to YouTube. Um,
Is this a
there,
positive move, though? I mean, how do you
yes,
get a thick skin in the first place?
great.
I've had over a
I
million
agree.
students on game dev, and yeah, probably 10,000 people spouting random negative stuff, and the response is always, thanks for your feedback. We've tried to make an improvement. We'll try to do better. We've made a change. How do you think of it now? The wrong people never actually come back constructively. You can do what you like. You'll never satisfy them, as you say. But the pursuit to try and satisfy that bottom 1% does tend to make the product a lot better. I wonder how creators or kids will be if they're so wrapped in cotton wool that they don't get a single
God,
thumbs down. Yeah.
God bless you Brits for understanding the importance of this, and the importance of having a thick skin. It's like you guys are conscious of it, and Americans never really became as conscious of this. That is a skill that honestly should be taught in schools at this point. That
But Tyler,
yes,
actually the creators can see the dislikes, they just don't appear publicly. So it's still
is that what the article says?
yes, yes.
Oh,
You still can, yeah, if you are the uploader, I mean the creator, you can still see how many dislikes you get, but it's not shown under
no.
the video. So you get your feedback.
I would love to. I want to make sure that that's true. That would seem kind of strange. It would defeat the whole point. Dislike
Right.
counts going. It says they're going private, so you could be right. Could help hide an embarrassing piece of YouTube history. The most disliked video on the entire of all of YouTube is the YouTube's own rewind or synopsis of 2018. That particular recap video sparked so much ire that YouTube recently announced the annual rewind videos were canceled.
Oh, yeah,
So,
maybe that's why they're hiding the dislikes, because
exactly
they
right.
hold the trophy for the worst. Yeah, protect them.
and they
Their own.
and YouTube itself stopped becoming a creator of those videos due to the dislikes. That's very ironic. There's also an argument that not being able to see public dislikes could lead to users watching a video that's not very good as insincere apology, perhaps, and informative looking content that ends up being an ad. Still, this is a good point. Maybe there's a lot of crap content out there that is actually clickbait. And that's your chance to let other viewers know this was clickbait. They put a fake, title or image. That happens. This does happen. And that's what, though that might become much more prevalent if there's no dislike button, because people aren't going to be able to have a way to signal to each other than in the comments that this is all clickbait.
I think
I
And
think
there's
for
an
sorry.
interest. Sorry, just an interesting distinction in the way you process it. So I've just been thinking it through. So Richard Branson's mum famously left him several miles from home when he was only a few years old, and said, "Kind of make your own way home." Now, you could process that as my parents don't love me, and that would be bad. You could get abandonment issues or whatever. Or you could process it as a challenge, a problem that needs to be solved. So certainly, when I used to look at feedback from our courses, I think I did put it into one of those two buckets. A piece of feedback had come in. It would either have something tangible in it you can do something about, in which case it would go in the bucket of let's immediately change the content, go back to the student and say, hey, we've made a tweak to the video content. Take another look. What do you think? Hopefully you'll enjoy it. And really thank them for being the tip of the iceberg of people who actually speak up, such that all of the other people who take and get a better experience. So they're awesome, those people. However they put it, I don't care how they phrase it. The question is, in the feedback, is there something actionable? And then the other bucket would be you read it 4 or 5 times, kind of frowning and trying to look and see if there's anything actionable in there. And then you realize it's just some ranty moron and there is nothing you can do about it. In which case it goes in the other bucket of just like, thanks for letting us know, kind of, and just ignore it. That's quite an interesting, binary way of kind of processing it. Is this actionable? Is it a challenge? Is it something that I can do something about? Or should I just ignore it? So
Yeah, at this point, I'm sincerely thinking there should be, just like there's sex ed in schools, or there used to be when I was a kid, there should be how to deal with negativity, how to deal with haters, how to deal with people pushing back against you, because it seems like that is a very real part of life that many people are ill-equipped to deal with. And this kind of speaks to that. I think of my friends from Israel who are incredibly well adept at how to debate people who disagree with them, and my Jewish American friends kind of inherited, a family environment where debate and disagreement is just ever present and is part of, moving forward. It comes through debate and disagreement, and they don't have this inherent reluctance or avoidance of anyone who has a differing opinion, and I see that as an incredible strength and an asset that I would hope would be more adopted elsewhere. It's an interesting culture that gets created where you hide the negativity, because and the biggest example of this, maybe the most pronounced example of this, is college campuses, where the students are not allowing speakers who have opinions of which they find distasteful, that they disagree with. They don't want to give stage time to speakers who say things that they fundamentally disagree with.
and
So
it's pervaded in corporate culture a little bit as well.
it's
No, it's
exactly
true
right.
because
It's coming into big corporates as well. Look at a great example. Thank you, Ben. The
yeah,
Antonio.
but it's interesting, Tyler, because essentially what we're saying is resilience is reducing overall, whether it's mental, physical, cognitive resilience or whatever perspective. And ironically, organizations are talking about we need to be more resilient in order to survive in the future. But the people within those organizations, at least the new generations coming in, are being less resilient at a personal level, right? So it's going to get interesting to how companies will survive in the future if
Right.
everyone's going to be so uber sensitive on everything.
This is the point. It is getting into corporate culture, and those are the students who were at the universities that catered to silencing, voices that they disagreed with, and now they go into the workplace and they expect kind of similar treatment. And
Yeah,
now,
quite.
after they finish their 4 years at some Silicon Valley job, next thing you know, they're on some government, some school board or some whatever, and this is what's the concerning bit. So anyway,
No, they walk out because there was a joke that was on their platform which they
right,
didn't like.
right,
Right?
right.
I'm
So
not.
anyway,
I'm not quite sure how I feel about it because on one hand, the term so it's sunsetting. Let's use the term sunsetting. I was on a call with Udemy.com at some point, kind of talking about like some future product ideas and stuff with them and yada yada. And they said, we're letting our instructor partners know that we're sunsetting this feature now. And I said, whoa, hold on. In front of several people, I'm like, what the fuck? What is sun? I literally like, what the fuck? And they look like they're even taken back that I use that word. I'm like, dude, it's not going to kill you. And I said, what the hell is sunsetting? They said, well, the feature is no longer going to be continued. Oh, you're scrapping the feature because it didn't work. They, no, we're sunsetting it. I'm like, what do you mean you're sunsetting it? Is it? Oh, am I going to be able to use the feature in 3 months? No, we're sunsetting it. So you're scrapping it. You're discontinuing. We're not discontinuing. We're sunset. I'm like, dudes, it's dressed up nicely. That
Yeah,
sounds
right.
nice. We would like to sit and watch a sunset, but for fuck's sake, it failed. You're sunsetting it. We're moving on.
Yeah,
And they it was really, on one hand, when I left it, I was like, that's actually quite sweet, isn't it? Oh, isn't it nice that we're going to watch a sunset?
right.
But they're pulling the plug on this expensive and disruptive feature. You could also say it how it is.
Yeah, there's a term that's going around in the U.S. and some of you, it's considered derogatory, but it's sort of a people who are uber sensitive like this, or the extreme of political correctness. They're being called by the other extremes as snowflakes, right? Yeah, I think you've all heard of that. They melted
So,
everything.
yeah, of course. So check this out. We opened this room today, 20 minutes ago, with the first comment of the day. Lakeisha will recall was her expressing how she thought the last room that we had 12 hours ago was one of the best rooms in a very long time that we've ever had. And the reason she liked it was primarily because we had two regular members had a very vibrant disagreement for nearly an hour. I mean, it went on and on and on and on and on. And I even had to use the boxing bell. And I'll tell you what, I got a DM during the middle when I used the boxing bell to announce the end of the first round of that skirmish. And she says, here it is. This debate on Apple was amazing, and I wish you hadn't stopped it. Michael is a great part of the speakers. I listen every morning. And so a lot of people agreed, even when we opened the room today, that, yeah, that was, that. And what was interesting about it was the debate got very heated, but never got intentionally personally insulting or disrespectful. I mean, it got close. It could have got there, but it didn't. And that's the important part. That could be incredibly useful for people to, maybe that's useful for a lot of people in the audience to witness that kind of intense debate without it getting personal. There was never any real personal attacks, thank God, but I'm not surprised. They're both gentlemen at the end of the day. And even though I'm prone to, crossing that line from time to time, but there's a lot to be learned from that exchange. There was a lot of truth that gets exposed when both people are willing to kind of go all in with the gloves off to say what you really want to say, and we're going to let you say it, and no one's going to cancel each other. At the end of the day, we're going to shake hands, but let's hear what you really think, and let's hear your best ability to make your point and take down the other person's point. It's like a verbal wrestling match, and it is, when it's done like it was done yesterday, it's enthralling to watch. So
and it really helps that it's actually on social audio, because can you imagine if you're in the same room? I would have left the room.
But you know what, though, Tyler? I mean, what you've just described, in my opinion, is the essence of tech news around the world. Yes, it's about the headlines, but I think what was nostalgic for me is last night took us back to the core, where you have people that have strong points of view, who are, who have deep knowledge and could really talk about the issues. So, I mean, the headlines are good, to get kind of the updates of what's happening, but the essence of who we are as a team, as a family now, I mean, last week certainly proved that, those of us that show up every day, we have something stronger than just being team members or colleagues, right? So we know each other, we understand each other, we're not afraid to go there, but it's all about trust and respect and a willingness to learn. And I think to the extent that we're able to, really kind of keep that at the core, it's part of our secret sauce.
It's
I
spokesmanship,
fully,
I think.
I fully agree.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, how do you get to your truth if you're filtering internally everything you say as you're
yeah,
trying to say it? It's
right, precisely.
Yes.
You have to create an environment where you're going to allow them the
Space.
the space to even potentially stretch go
overstep the mark. That's what I was
oh
going to say.
yeah,
Is that this even drawing a line at personal attacks. I mean, I listened into a lot of the Bitcoin rooms, and it was fascinating yesterday. I heard somebody being polite, and it was really strange. This guy was saying, "Look, I don't disagree with you." Somebody who speaks every. He was prefacing things with like, "I don't disagree with you," and I wouldn't, I wouldn't doubt the intention of anything you say. That's very rare in those rooms. It'd normally be, "Look, motherfucker, you are dumb. Your mama didn't love you, and what the hell are you talking about?" You're worthless and you've got no education. And the people don't care. They love each other. Just same family atmosphere as here. But
the Maxis are a special. The Maxis are a special kind
special
of
breed.
snowflake.
Yeah, opposite of a snowflake. Yeah.
Well, they have skin.
So the interesting debate would be: Do you want to not? Is it really ringing the bell if you step over the mark into something personal? I mean, on one hand, I completely agree. You shouldn't make personal comments, but on the other hand, does it matter? It's all about the recipient. It's quite fun to have a challenge to think of something somebody can say to you that can hurt. I mean, why?
Come on, Ben. We're not into like S&M, right? It's really
verbal S&M. That's it right there. Verbal S&M.
It's about the
just
content.
Went there, Ben.
It's about pushing the edge. It's about, but it's never personal, right? It's about having a point of view. And I wish that Cal were here. I know that he's listening somewhere. But it's about having a strong point of view. It's not just about, tweeting headlines and kind of reading them out. I mean, yes, it's good to be updated, but I think one of the things that I sometimes miss, I feel like I'm taking us into that zone, but this is like a family roundtable right now. One of the things that I sometimes miss is having like people that are so
Lakeisha
strong
misses
in their
Duffy.
point of view. Well, I didn't go there.
I know.
But what I do miss
those were the days.
But what I do miss is, having people who are like really, really top, and really know their content and really have a point of view, and we're able to hear multiple perspectives. I think that's where new knowledge comes from. I think that's where we're able to create new synthesis. I think that's how we're able to learn, so we're not just reciting, but we're pushing the boundaries both, individually, but then collectively. What does that mean? What are the different points of view? How do we get to shared understanding?
But again, Tyler, you might also remember very early on when I started joining the community, and there was a heated debate. I tried to wing in and to kind of mediate, and I got just beaten.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Florian, I remember that.
Yes, I remember this.
Lessons. Oh man, I got beaten up in between, and then I shut just up, and
then now Florian's learned to just let it breathe.
I forgot. Yep. So I got to retell this story for those who weren't there.
Thank you, Tyler, Professor X.
Yeah. So and Florian, I was actually very curt and even rude with you in correcting, what was happening. And I've felt bad about how I responded to you for many weeks after that. And I'm glad we can laugh about it now. But at the time, we had this nightly ritual where we would take the most contentious article and let people on both, where it was an issue where half the audience felt one way, half the audience felt another way. And you get two people really, or sometimes groups of people, 2 versus 2 or 3 versus 3, really duking it out, like boxing it out.
You unleashed the fury.
Yes, and it was typically the American gathering. This is the European time zone, morning time zone, and this was
some Americans in here.
Yeah, but anyway, it would get very heated almost every night. And Florian, as a European, comes in, and I forget who was arguing that day anyway, but Florian was trying to stop their argument, which is, no, we're here too to have that argument. And he's like, guys, like, this is becoming unproductive. You were actually valid in your point, which is,
I remember
right.
Leon.
Oh yes.
Leon?
Yeah.
And Greg Duffy, or is it Charles? Oh, Charles.
No, it was Leon. Charles. It was Charles and Leon, and they can both. Those two dudes can handle it. Like, those guys love to argue, right? And specifically, those two gentlemen are very comfortable in a very heated debate. So they were going at it very strongly, as they had done many times before. This was not their first strong argument. So we know how it's going to play out. And Florian, it was his first time watching one of these arguments, especially between these two guys. Right. And Florian was being, a Swiss, he's like, guys, come on, break it up. And I was like, Florian, no, stop. You're actually going to make it a worse problem here. Just stay off the court. Let these guys, duke it out on. It's like a hockey match, where if you've not watched hockey before, and in hockey matches, there's always a fight, or it's not even a real hockey match. By many, by many hockey fans would say if there's no fight, it wasn't a real game. So when these two guys start throwing off the gloves in the middle of the ice rink and start battling at it, and Florian's stepping in to stop it, I'm like, no, that's what we're here to do. And I even, was quite rude to Florian and asking him to remain seated while the boxing match ensues. Anyway,
to shut the fuck up. That's what.
yeah,
No, watch, just watch.
Yes.
You're screwing with my bookmaking.
Yes.
But what's, go ahead, finish.
I was going to say, I've also overstepped. I remember being very rude to Shahin at one point. I remember being very rude to, I believe, Ken at one point, and various people at various
Jonathan
points.
recently.
Huh?
And
Who?
Jonathan recently.
Yes,
Jonathan.
that's right. I
He's
was.
cool, yeah, he's back.
Yeah, you're right. I got very heated at Donna, and even Donna, who I love, actually. I have
What?
Yeah.
But you know what it is? I think part of it is this notion that I believe in, and that's iron sharpens iron, right? So if you're strong, and I can't believe that I'm saying this because, Cal, who I'm sure he's listening somewhere. So Cal was my boss back in the day, and he used to set up these kinds of situations at work. And I remember being in his office once, and I was like, Cal, I went home with a migraine yesterday. And he was like, okay, that's good. And I'm like, what do you mean? Because there was this guy, and Cal would he's like, now you have a point of view. Now you have something to stand on. And I guess it's maybe just a matter of time and appreciation. But I think that it's important that, as people, as leaders, as folks with, who are shaping dialogues, we have to have a point of view, and that comes out by sharing it and maybe defending it and then maybe relenting. But just showing up and sitting on the stage and reading a headline, that doesn't do it.
I have to add real quickly that Chris is in the top of my mind as we talk about this, because he had a masterful way of making his point very strongly while also recognizing the other person's point. And what a masterful
he was an active listener, Tyler. He was an excellent active listener.
Even against somebody he directly disagreed with strongly, he would sincerely listen to try to understand your perspective and would work to, as best as he possibly could, and he could do it better than anybody, embody your argument and try and see it from your perspective to try and gain your perspective. And from time to time, he would even say, I see what you're saying, and there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. And it was I learned a lot from him, and we've all lost from not having his voice here with us.
Tyler,
Sadness,
the other thing he would also do is he'd say, okay, I'm convinced, I'm ready to change my mind.
Yeah,
I've heard him say that a couple of times. So he would have a strong view, but he'd be ready to be convinced.
Oh yeah, if you could make a better argument, he would change. If there was a better perspective, he would adopt it. That's true intellectual honesty right there. So
that's key. That flexibility that's key. Lakeisha, at the risk of cordially agreeing with you on two fronts, which I'm trying not to do this morning. Firstly, I love that iron sharpens iron. It kind of also implies that diamond or something harder blunts it. So I think that's makes me think of like three people in a rock paper scissors. And maybe to get a good discussion, you have different people interacting with different people in different ways, such that it's not just a loggerheads or one person doesn't shut down. But the other thing you talked about is the importance of like the content as well, that the people who are arguing or debating have got to have something new to bring, some new facts. It's not just going back and forth with quips. There's actually some new content there. So thanks for the stimulating. Right. I'm trying to be contentious here, and now I'm thanking you. But anyway,
but it's good to see Tina here, because Tina used to participate in our old school heated debates from time to time. So the next article is
Tyler.
Yes. Yeah.
Just one more thing on Chris. Is there anyone who's taking the ball and running with the GoFundMe?
Yes, we're making progress.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
And later on today, Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time, we are going to have a session in Karma Club to talk about entrepreneurs and how to guard their health. But it is also a session to commemorate Chris. And Dr. Francine will be airdropping her Karma coin, and the proceeds will go to Chris and his family. So please join us.
And Regina will be there, right? Shirley?
Yes,
Yes.
Regina will be there on stage to understand the content. Yes, that's right.
For those who don't know, first, we lost one of our most beloved Tech News members here. And his wife, Regina, has been joining us nearly every day since that. And it's incredibly touching to me personally. I imagine it is for those in the room who know that she's here with us each day. And she does it because, she woke up every morning and went to sleep every night listening, remotely and overhearing it.
Yeah, and she says she wants to be close to Chris' hobby, so that's why she's listening as well. By the way, I've already pinned the room on top of this room, so please click on it and click on the bell, and then you'll be reminded when the room starts. Thank you.
You, Cheryl. So the next article, number 2, is that the U.S. Justice Department is suing Uber, alleging that Uber overcharged riders with disabilities in violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The U.S. Justice Department said Wednesday it filed a lawsuit against Uber, alleging the company charged disabled passengers a wait time fee when they were slow to enter their rides. Oh, that's truly egregious. Oh, man. On the face of it, I gotta say that's really screwed up.
You mean they won't stop being handicapped if it costs too much?
Jesus. I gotta say, as much as, I'm quite friendly with many of the very earliest Uber folks, and very dear friends, in fact. You know what?
You should withhold judgment. It's alleged. So
Yeah. I know. I'm just saying, that's why I specifically said on the face of it, if this is what it claims to be, then, you know, then let it be this way. Let geeks and entrepreneurs around the world know this is something that can't really be overlooked.
This is not
I guess
cool.
Yeah,
I guess they didn't want to, take the cost of it because they'd still, I guess, have to pay the Uber drivers because in the end, nobody would pick up people who would be handicapped or
right,
visibly handicapped in some way. So
right.
they would have to take the cost on themselves, and they didn't think
You
to
know
do
what
that.
though? It's
Reese,
there's a whole other perspective, which is, why not become and brand yourself as the a massive solution for, because a lot of people who are disabled aren't able to drive, so that demographic could disproportionately become some of your best users, because right, they don't own cars,
yeah,
or they're not
maybe
disabled.
Tyler,
Yeah.
they are already. A
Tyler,
ton of
Hang on,
blind people are
wait, hang
using.
on.
Oh,
Hans is
sorry,
trying to
sorry.
jump in, and for those who don't know, Hans
be my
is
eyes.
directly related to and has built one of the most beautiful solutions, which Apple itself gave one of its most prestigious awards to
Design
Hans
award.
for building,
Yes.
the Design of the Year award for, I believe it was 2020 or 2021, Hans.
2021. This.
Yeah. So Hans,
2021.
I'm eager to hear your point here. Go ahead.
Thank you. I know that a lot of people in the US is using Uber and the other ride-sharing apps intentionally.
Right.
But I also know, and I'm kind of willing to make a trade-off with them. If they stop not accepting guide dogs, then we can pay a little more, because it is so embarrassing for people and for Uber that you order a car, and then when they see the guide dog and the guide dog handler cannot see them, then they just go by
Oh.
and without picking the person up. And this is outrageous, stupid of them. And yeah, there's been a lot of cases like this. So they simply need to up their game a little bit for their most vulnerable customers. Sorry.
Well, my point is,
Tyler.
is why not embrace that and use it as, I mean, even if you're being a greedy capitalist and be like, listen, we are the preferred, you know, um, we're a huge solution to this community, and
Mm.
wear that as a badge of honor. And it might cost you a little bit, but so does marketing and PR.
Yeah, it would be amazing PR.
Tyler,
Yeah.
there is an element, like when you look at New York City, for example. I think Hans is like so absolutely correct, because my father was disabled, and it's a very interesting dynamic because, first of all, the city's very crowded, so it's also a logistical nightmare because they require more space in some ways. Like if they have a dog, or if they have probably like some sort of assisted product that they're going with, like a walker or something that assists them with it. It's a challenge with a number of things. One, our medical system doesn't have what they have in Netherlands, for example, where there is a set system that comes and picks you up, that the government will handle. Meaning, like, if there's people that are disabled and need to take a ride share, there is a system here in Holland that will pick them up free of charge and get them to where they want to go, especially if it's going to like an appointment or something. So it's interesting to see, and Hans being blind and having made that app is one physical impairment, but there are other physical impairments. One of my yoga teachers is an amputee, and she used to teach in Manhattan with me, and she used to have a hard problem trying to get just to a cab that would stop for her because she was an amputee, and they knew it would not be able to get the next ride, and that was yellow cabs, right? The Uber was a little bit better, but I think it A, depends on the disability you have. B, it depends on the infrastructure of the country's systems and logistics of travel, TSA. And then the other part would be what you just said about capitalism. There's got to be someone that would be interested in making an Uber app for those that are physically challenged, and that person could become a unicorn themselves, because there are so many people. And in Europe, the population's aging. This is also something. How much do you want to have these individuals behind the wheel of a car if they can drive? You know, this is where there's a myriad of things to consider as we age, how this could actually be a proactive app that could help not just disabled or physically challenged, but those that also may become physically challenged as they get older. Because not everyone's going to keep their eyesight well, not everyone's going to keep their limbs well. It's just a matter of how you live your life.
I guess autonomous cars will solve that problem
Yeah, I was just
also.
thinking that.
In
But what's the
Sweden,
in between?
in Sweden, we have a pretty good system here. Where the government subsidizes, I think they're like prepaid cards. So if your disability or you're temporary getting surgery and you're disabled for a short time, you get one of these cards, and then you basically get nearly free cab rides that's booked through a special system, but the end drivers are private companies. So I'm guessing there's some sort of way to ensure that there's enough of these disabled vans and so
Yeah,
forth.
the challenge is that Sweden, what's the population of Sweden? 9 million. The population of New York City is 18 million alone. The United States is 335 million. It's something, I think this was discussed yesterday, Tyler, about South Korea. Someone was commenting on how small the country is versus being able to sort of replicate that model in a bigger country where there's more bureaucracy. Because I know the Dutch themselves, from my MBA, there was something interesting that they tried to solve a problem for China, and China actually laughed at them. Because they were like, well, wait a second, you expect your problem that you solved in a country of 16 million to be scalable to a country of 1.4 billion? They pretty much got laughed at. And I think that's the challenge is how can we think out of the box? And as the late Chris, my Trader Joe Chris would say, how can we look at it from their set of lenses as well? Like, how can we get into that person's shoes and see how it feels for them to be ostracized or be negated in society because they have a disability that they didn't ask for? You know what I'm saying? There is less respect towards them as well. And I saw it with my dad. I saw it with my friend. And, you know, it's even scarier when you're a minority, because my friend was African American. And they didn't even want to take her home because she lived in a bad part of Brooklyn. So you see, this is where it gets really, and she was a female. So it gets really, really sort of tricky how to solve the problem unless you actually know the deep recesses of what the deeper problem is and also it's interconnected. There are several problems. It's quite complex, in my opinion.
I do understand what Amy was trying to say. At the same time, who is going to pay the cost for the disabled people? Because that's the issue we have in Japan. Since we are having very big issue of the aging societies, and many older generations have to give up their driver's license and having issue of their moving around and even the shoppings at the same time. Who is going to pay the price to support them? Because
Correct.
in aging societies
That's right.
means that
Oh,
we've been increasing huge amount of tax every year, actually, well, every year, especially for the social securities, and which is really causing huge gap between younger generation versus or elderly, which also having very much troublesome issue we haven't managed to sort out yet. So I understand Amy's point of view. At the same time, we need to think about accessibility as well as the cost. Who is going to pay the cost?
yeah.
Correct.
Well,
And actually, to
your
Mocha's
point
point,
is you've
to
got
Mocha's
half your population is going to need some kind of assistance. Like, what you could half the population's over the age of 55 or something, and then very soon half the population's over 60 or 65, and now you're going to need that 2 minute window that Uber gives you before they start the ride, the clock. You only have 2 minutes from the time it arrives to getting in the car and going, or they start charging you. They might need to increase that as the average population age goes from 50 to 60 to 70. If
Tyler,
But
half your
then we don't
to
really
population is
have
Mocha's
60.
the
Tyler, to
issue.
Mocha's point is very interesting. Let me just say one thing. Tomoko Domorogato, there's one interesting thing that she said that's super fascinating, and Tyler, it dovetails back to what you've been talking about for months in terms of children and China, that Chris was also talking about kids, right? The reality is that kids are there to also support the ecosystem of the whole economy as well, because if you don't have a younger generation to take up the slack, unfortunately, using the word very loosely, you will run into issues like what Tomoko's saying. Okay, great, they're getting older, who's going to pay for that? And the challenge there is if the younger generation isn't there to start contributing to the system, then that basically leaves older people having to work longer in the jobs to contribute more into the economic system, because you're seeing the same thing in Holland. We're seeing it here as well, because the older are getting older. 50% of the population is over 64, and the young generation wants to go to Bali, Thailand, and Vietnam and be digital nomads. And they're not contributing into the social system. So now the social system's getting affected, where they're cutting the money, and that's where it gets
Hang on.
dangerous, because they're cutting it.
You just added a whole monkey wrench into the
I know.
conversation.
I do that
Because
nicely.
yeah, well, because if the population in Japan is aging quickly, and it is in much of the developed world, and I lived in Tokyo, I still feel like I should be living in. I lived in Tokyo for many years, and I still, in my heart, still live there. However, at some point, I think you're going to see a mass migration of these folks, these aging populations, moving to Southeast Asia, especially the ones who didn't have kids. Like an example that Tomoko gives, who's going to take care of these older folks, especially if they don't have kids? Well, they might end up moving to Southeast Asia, where they can essentially have a sort of extended family who does take care of them. Where, as Lakeisha will tell you, like the little neighborhoods that you live in Thailand, like the people look after each other in a way that doesn't happen especially in even in Tokyo
Well,
specifically.
actually, many Japanese or elderly moved to Southeast Asia already,
Right.
because of the living cost, and also the caretaking is much cheaper than in Japan, or even
Precisely.
in the and yeah, we've been
Yeah, precisely my point. I think this is going to be a massive global shift in the next 10, 20, 30 years of
I,
developed country folks who don't have kids, who want people to support them. And Southeast Asia is kind of just really comes to mind in a beautiful way in that regard. So it's
I think it's going to need more of a systemic solution, though, because I mean, you can't have everybody moving to,
true,
Asia and Africa, right? So
right?
countries, I mean, Europe, like the Western world, let's say, Europe, America, yes, the populations are aging. So, like when we're talking about now, we're talking about it because there's a case of, discrimination. So, like treating a certain set of the population a different way from the rest. But when you have more than 60% of the population that needs a specific specific assistance, then it kind of stops being discrimination in a way. It just becomes the basic thing that the company offers from that point on, right? So like with America, yes, it's a problem because the percentage of people who require this kind of aid or this kind of assistance is small enough for it to, like the government not to be able, it's too big for the government to kind of handle it and subsidize it like it can do in Sweden. But on the other hand, it's not something that like you can make money on from the capitalist side, which kind of that's what makes America spin, right? So like if you can make money on something, then somebody will pop up who's going to take care of it.
Well
So then
said.
it kind of leaves Uber with the situation where, yes, they can spin it in a kind of PR way and use this social situation, to kind of promote themselves and to solve a world problem at the same time. But at the same time, like, is it their responsibility as a capitalist corporation? Like we are, I mean, I believe that yes, companies, such big companies, should have some degree of social responsibility, but technically that's not what they were set up to do. So it would require some kind of shift either in the the leadership of the companies or systemic changes as well that would kind of make it that these companies do have to do it, because many companies do. I mean, like if you look at accessibility on the web, I have to give kudos to Google, like with all the things that they have developed. And for SEO, if you want your website to be positioned well, if you don't have accessibility on your website, if it's not designed in a way to be accessible to people who have different kinds of disabilities, your website is not getting positioned. Basically, you're not searchable, right? So some companies do take it upon themselves to have these kind of things and to take on these kind of issues. So yeah.
Well, when inclusion is taken seriously as part of ESG, and that if the notion works and that hits stock prices and people's stock options and so on, then that would be a reasonably powerful incentive. But stepping back to the larger problem, how do we deal with this? Well, there are two trends that will probably soften the or make the challenge easier. One is increasing health span, and the other is that the general deflationary pressure due to technology in general and automation in particular, such that you can have higher costs because you're focusing on things like this, but other costs are going down. So things are pretty much steady.
Yeah, I agree
And
with
just
Magna and Eli here that there needs to be a bigger event, a monetary event that is deflationary. The reason that people, elderly people or disabled people in New York and Japan um, are not getting the rides is because, I'm guessing is because they can't afford the cost of the Uber every day or twice a day or 4 times a day. So there needs to be a deflationary event, in my opinion.
It's partly that
Um,
the drivers don't want to uh, go through the additional what
I
they perceive as a headache, where in reality that the company should incentivize them, create some kind of structure that actually incentivizes them. Anyway, I want
and there's a
Grecia.
cultural context in Japan. I just want to
Of
mention
course,
most of the taxi driver, the cab drivers, the drivers are salarymen. They are not self-employed. So if I'm not wrong, Tomoko, I think Uber cab is still banned here. Uber car is banned in Japan because you have to be a licensed taxi company to run that kind of business. But Uber, of course, Uber it is doing well. Yeah,
so
it's a different business model.
I want to invite Grecia White, who her bio seems to be directly relevant. She has some professional background on this. Grecia, can you feel free to jump
Hi.
in? Hey.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, so I wanted to mention that transit agencies do have to provide services for people with disabilities. Like I know in Boston, the MBTA provides a service that's called The Ride, and it's like door-to-door service. So like it'll come and pick up the person, and it has like, it's like a not like a small bus, but kind of like a van that's adapted for, like if you need a wheelchair, or like it has a lift or like a ramp, which is great, and it is heavily subsidized by the government. However, it's oftentimes like it's kind of a hassle to actually book the trips. There's like a different interface that these programs use. So I think if you want to relate it back to tech, I think that's where a lot of work could actually happen, like just helping kind of like boosting the existing infrastructure that's there and making the process easier for people like to book the trip, because sometimes you have to book it like a day in advance, or like you can't cancel within like if it's too close to your time, or there's not a lot of flexibility, which is tricky, or like sometimes it ends like the service is only available during certain times of the day, which are often shorter than when the agency provides its services. So, for example, like maybe if you are in need of the service, it ends at 8 p.m. But then that's very, that puts a lot of restrictions on your life. Like, what if you want to go on a date, and it's like 9 p.m.? What do you do then? So, anyway, I don't know if that was shared. I jumped on a little bit late, but just wanted to share.
Sounds like a space that should be disrupted or could be disrupted, like a business opportunity for somebody to, create, let's say, autonomous cars that have all the functionalities. Like for example, you can order everything voice assisted, and then they have cars that are easier to get into if you have a wheelchair or things like that. And Uber could do that at some point.
But Magda, I'm sorry, I just want to pop in on this, and for everyone that's saying this, the service that I'm sorry, I think Gracie was talking about, has been around in the inner city for years, and she's right. Some of this, especially in the U.S. and maybe not in Japan and the rest of the world, is subsidized. You're talking about the private sector versus the public sector, which should be called the P3, public-private sector consortium. So a lot of these companies are subsidized publicly, like the one she was saying, where they don't have the innovation because, we just go back, and I think Greg talked about it. We go back to a larger point of what are the incentives. If you're building a company and it's innovating, you're going to do it for top dollar for your shareholders, even if you want to do good and that's your intention, and you can do good as long as your CEO and that board of directors is behind that CEO, he or she, and you can navigate it. But at some point, it's optimization for money or profiteering, And so the public sector side is just, let's just give, something of a service, but it's not feasible because technology has brought the onslaught of people living longer. They're living healthier. Older people are living longer. This was not in the models of any insurance, actuaries that said that we would, be dying like by when we were 40 or whatever, not even counting COVID. And so a lot of people, and Peter Diamandis has talked about this, like in his book, like he's like, the elder will live longer than they've ever have because they will get smarter about it, their technology, they'll just change their life habits, they'll just be aware. And so then that brings on a system of an economic global system that was never prepared to deal with this, in my opinion, ever. It was prepared for certain people to die, neither in a war, excuse my language, but in a world war. So you just kill off, so much of the population, or they just die from attrition. But when you have no war, no major war, and then you have people living longer, what do you do with the population growth if you didn't, put that in your models? And so I think that's where we use technology, AGI, and everything else to deal with that. But we have to change the game on the economics, in my opinion. And that's probably where a lot of things can be decentralized. There's DeFi and everything, but that's just moving money. I'm talking about the core has to be economic growth at some point and changing the entire game of how we live and breathe, and maybe COP26 of how we start looking at the Earth population of what we do. And that then changes everything because then it just filters down where Uber will never do anything against their boards. If the CEO does it, he's fired. He's out of a job, right? But
So
he has to
maybe
make a profit.
so maybe that's kind of the good thing about, these kind of lawsuits and articles and things like that, because they make the issue so public that it puts enough pressure on the CEO or the board or whoever to actually do something about it.
Well,
Tyler,
first,
doesn't it boil down to like the infrastructure of the highways to be set up for this as well?
totally. But the thought that keeps going through my head is if I have a company, an Uber like company, I believe I would at least float the idea, test the idea, beta test the idea of asking riders, "Hey, do you want to pay it forward and help
Hey,
subsidize?"
Tyler, that's a great point. Damn, that's really good. Like, would
I,
they opt
I'll be
in?
honest.
Would
I'm a terrible tipper, honestly. As Ellen can tell you, we went out to lunch. I got
Because you live in Asia for too long.
yeah, exactly right, and and yeah, yeah, Japan and Thailand don't tip, so yeah, I'll be honest, I'm a terrible tipper, but and Sweden doesn't either, honestly. So barely does. So it's but and I don't generally give to charities, and I'm not the most charitable person economically. I prefer to be more
Yeah, he doesn't
giving with
even
my
pay for Ellen's
yeah no.
subway.
I prefer to be more giving with my time than financially. However, that is an issue where I would absolutely participate. Where the idea of like, hey, do you want to add $1 to the price of your ride that then gets utilized for, disadvantaged folks or whatever? Absolutely, all day long I would do that. So I imagine there's solutions, but because that could be a win-win. I that's the type of thing. It's a human psychology thing, a cognitive science thing, where people will get more for that dollar than you get more happiness, more dopamine for that dollar than you can spend anywhere else. And there's that, well, why not to do that? You create this goodwill economy within your app ecosystem or something like that. Anyway, I want to get on.
So
Can I
it's
can
You
I
should
ask
just real
message
quick.
them, Tyler, with your solution.
Huh?
can I ask Jay? Jay, how does Grab deal with this? Is there any special arrangement for this
Oh,
Yeah, for
good
certain
in
question.
drivers,
Singapore?
but
Great question,
yeah,
Charles.
yeah, great question. So there is a special setup, but I think the problem is the governments, right? Like it's not like America where you can do whatever you want. You have to work with the governments, and along with the certain areas that are designated for disabled people. We need to do that. So we set that up. But we've had this conversation a while ago, Tyler, where the infrastructure does need to change for all the highways or PMD devices, right? Because I think Singapore wasn't ready for everybody to be on like scooters, right? And they banned those personal motor devices. So there is a agreement in place, but you need to work with the government to make that happen.
Jay, for those who don't know, Jay works for the Uber of Southeast Asia called Grab, which is just booming. I know. And I have to ask you, Jay, I was using Grab in Bangkok. I don't get to use it where I live, but now that I was in Bangkok recently, I was used it quite a lot during my recent Bangkok visit. And I was surprised how affordable it is. And I even was ordering Starbucks to bring it to me because it was even cheaper than taking the car to Starbucks. So I had one ride back to my hotel. I'm in right in the center of downtown Bangkok at Chit Lom, Phnom Chit, like right in the Times Square of Bangkok. And the streets are all one way, and there's these major intersections. And if you're on the wrong side of the street, you're going to have to drive 30 minutes to get to the, all around town to get to the other side of the same block. And the driver came to meet me, and I told him very specifically where I was. I'm at the Starbucks, and the Taco Bell on the corner of, Phnom Chit and Chit Lom. And he was on the other side of the street that I could not get to, and he couldn't get to me, but we're only 10 meters apart. And so the ride assumed we were in the same spot, and it said you have, a few minutes to get into the car. And then he had to drive for 20 minutes around Bangkok to get to where I was at 10 meters away so that we could be driving in the same direction so I could get in the car safely. I don't know what happened in that case, but if you could look into my account and investigate that case, I would appreciate that. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Anyway,
So send me your
I will.
ID, the booking ID, and I can
Okay.
look it up for you.
So the
So,
next
so
article,
Tyler,
yes,
on your point, I mean, it's great that you and hopefully a lot of other people feel that way about, carrying some of the costs, but really this is something that's the company's responsibility as part of its business obligations, and that shouldn't be
you're
shoved
right.
onto the
You're
generosity of
right.
customers.
You're right. You're right. I agree. The next one is Apple unveils business essentials for small and medium businesses with device management, iCloud storage, and more, starting at $2.99 per month. Per user, per month per user, and launching in spring of 2022. So if you're a small and medium business and you have 10 team members, now you're talking $30 a month to manage all of the devices and apps, etc.
But for
Um,
what?
well, it's not. It seems partly inspired by Google One and how they allow you, if you have a whole bunch of Android devices amongst your team members. Say you're a small business and you give all of your team members Android phones, you can manage all of their apps, all of the whole suite of Google apps, which ones they have access to. You can even get into their emails, and there's all kinds of. It's enterprise basically, but this is for small business. It even has Apple Care Plus for the whole scenario. In this case, for Apple, it says Apple's introducing a new business offering called Apple Business Essentials that combines device management, 24/7 phone support, and business iCloud storage, and an option so all the files are owned by the business, right? Amongst all the
So no
users'
Office
devices.
365, nothing.
Yes, exactly. And so it's Microsoft 365. It's Google's, whatever Google calls their enterprise thing now, I forget. And an option for on-site repairs for businesses of up to 500 employees.
Ooh.
Oh, that's crazy. The free beta period launches today with the full service coming in the spring of 2022. Here's the quote: "Small businesses are at the core of our economy, and we're proud that Apple products play a role in helping these companies grow. Apple Business Essentials is designed to help streamline every step of employee device management with a small business, from setup, onboarding, and upgrading to accessing fast service and prioritize support, all while keeping data backed up and secure so companies can focus on running their business. IT managers can also enforce vital security settings such as File Vault for full disk encryption on Macs and Activation Lock to protect company data if the devices are lost or stolen, if employees use personal devices at work. Apple's user enrollment creates cryptographic separation for their work data to keep personal data private while company data remains secure." Super clever, very smart setup. And I get it's because if their competitors like Google and Microsoft offer this and they don't, well, that makes it a very easy choice for small businesses and even anything, even bigger businesses, where Google's kind of out offering and Microsoft's out offering them on the enterprise side. They've got to make something competitive or they're going to lose market share on the iPhones. Indeed, they no doubt they already have conceded a lot of market share of their devices to companies because they don't offer these kinds of services that they clearly need. So the next one is from the Wall Street Journal. Did a look into Elon Musk's move for selling 10% of his Tesla stock after, and when he did this tweet recently at the end of last week, or was it earlier this week, where he did a Twitter poll saying, "Should I sell 10% of my Tesla shares?" And he says, "Whichever, I will do whatever the crowd says." And the crowd voted 56% in favor of him selling 10% of his shares. And then very quickly, Tesla stock price fell 12% following. And then so Wall Street Journal's looking into that. I don't know that there's much to look into, but Elon tweeted himself saying much is made lately of the unrealized gains being a means of tax avoidance, and he doesn't like to be accused of avoiding taxes. So if you okay, I'll sell my shares and make it a realized gains and pay taxes on that just to prove a point.
Tyler,
And
that's weird. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I saw an article on CBC and some other blogs in the U.S. They never mentioned that it was a blog and he asked the crowd. The spin I saw was that he did it because of tax purposes.
right. But he
Like
really
only because of tax, not that he asked the crowd, should I
right,
sell or not. They
Well,
just said,
that might have been on his mind when he before he posed the question, right?
right. Yeah.
This is a chess move by him.
Well,
Okay,
especially
first
if he believes they're going to raise the uh, tax rate, because he doesn't take a salary; he's 100% based on his share value, and if they're going to increase the capital gains taxes, then it probably is better that he sells it now. But
I think
But
I
it's
think
his money. Why can't he sell it now? And I mean,
he needs
why is this
cash.
a bad move? Yeah, if
there's
it is
one.
his money, it's
He has
liquidated.
said he's going to be. He's not. He has said previously that he won't sell his shares, like in interviews historically, on the premise that he wants to make the point, create the. It's not a narrative. I mean, he's been living by it, that he wants to show that he believes in his company completely, and he was the first money in, and he says he'll be the last money out, meaning he'll never sell his shares. But now he is selling shares, and that introduces a whole interesting debate. So
And
sorry.
he'll
but
probably, and Tyler, what he'll do is he'll define that and say, I'm not going to sell shares that were my original shares, but shares that I get because of stock options or just even exercising the options. Because I think he had some options, someone said, that were going to expire worthless, so he had to exercise them. The mere act of exercising the options creates a massive taxable event, even if he wants to keep the stock. So therefore, in order not to have this massive taxable event and to have some cash to pay the taxes, he sold the stock probably that he got from exercising the options. It's very common, as I said in a previous room. It's done all the time. It's a simultaneous exercise and sale, and quite frankly, the tax laws kind of force you into that situation. Because otherwise, even for him, I mean, he could have a liquidity issue. It's just a different liquidity issue than most of us are used to, because it's such big numbers. Because that's the way the law is. So yeah, so he sells the stuff. It's
but
not a big
but
deal.
Ken, to one other point, and I just did a conference and speak about it in Kerrville, Texas. Elon is building a gigafactory in Texas in Austin to build his new Cybertruck. And that's supposed, and I put out a PR on this, but it'll employ 5,500 people. So I'm wondering, and this is a Cybertruck that will drive itself. It's an autonomous Cybertruck. So if you talk about supply chains and everything, maybe he's shifting money to build that. Texas is helping him, and he's shifted completely all of his operations to Texas. So maybe this has something to do with that. Just adding a side note, but it's intriguing.
He moved the thing to Texas, obviously because costs are lower. He got pissed off at California. He
Yeah.
got into a thing with California during COVID. It has nothing to do with this. I'm telling you what this is because I've seen it a zillion times. It is not, it's just on a larger scale. This is basically just exercise. It's a you've exercised options. It created a taxable event, and so now you need to get some cash to pay the taxes, even for him. Okay, that's all it is, and it's everybody should stop overthinking this.
I agree. Ken hit it straight on the nail there.
Now I have a question. So I think in the last month, so there is a billionaires tax plan that uh, by the Senate Finance Committee Chair Roe Wyden that this was talked during the committee, right? So will this move, I mean Elon's move to uh, influence this bill in the future?
I don't think it's that sophisticated. That in all likelihood, and this is I've said this for a while. I don't think this larger bill is going to pass. Okay, I mean, it passed the House barely. I mean, they sent it to the Senate. The Manchin's already indicated he's probably not voting for it. Um, so so there's really no tax provisions yet. Everything's just a proposal. I mean, Wyden's got a lot of influence because he chairs Senate Finance, but Sinema's already said she doesn't want to vote to raise taxes. So I don't think it's anything to do with that. It's just under current tax law, without any changes in the law, he had to he has to come up with a lot of cash to deal with the option exercise. That's it. Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Tyler, I had a couple of comments.
Sure.
One is that the Senate, as it relates to unrealized gains, it has been pointed out that real estate taxes are commonly unrealized gain as well, and that actually impacts the majority of the country. So that makes it a complicated issue, and maybe Ken has some comments on it because he's close to this area.
Yeah,
And
you're
then
correct. But again, there's a lot of proposals that have been floated, but nothing that's really on the table to do that. It was an idea. Somebody had it. Um, and then that kind of, died on the unrealized gains. So now they're looking to come up with something closer to what Elizabeth Warren wanted to do and tax maybe some unrealized gains for, I guess, if he qualifies as one of the wealthiest people in the country, I guess. Yeah, so he would have that. But you know what? That's not even necessarily going to pass. They don't have votes. Okay, they
right,
don't.
right,
They don't have enough votes where everybody agrees. I'm talking about the U.S. Senate. Okay, um, and so I don't think anything's going to happen. I mean,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and particularly with the current situation with inflation, it's going to be harder and harder to pass the spending aspect of that second bill. Okay, so
right.
that's been my thesis all along, and maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see. Yeah.
Right, right. It's just that I think it provides impetus for the average citizen to say, why am I paying taxes on unrealized gains? Because I haven't sold the house,
No, 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 no.
etc.
They were going to limit it to the super wealthy. It wasn't going to. It
No,
wasn't.
I'm saying the flip side. I'm saying that, hang on a second. Now that you mentioned it, unrealized gain, I've been paying taxes on my unrealized gains on the house every year. Why am I doing that? Why is it that it's okay for me, but it's not okay for him? I think it opens that discussion, in my view.
You're talking
Or,
about property tax. You're paying
yeah,
unrealized gain.
yeah,
That's a
property
local.
taxes.
That's a local tax. It's determined by your local government. It's not determined by Congress.
And
So
it's
that's a
it's
whole.
also it's also a lower value than market value. But can you imagine the brain drain of the U.S. if this law? I mean, this law would never pass, but if it did, I mean, people wouldn't be moving to Miami and Texas and Puerto Rico. They'd be moving out of the borders of the United States.
Well, actually, that leads to my other cynical point is that the cynics were saying that Elon is moving to Texas because when he was selling $100,000 sports cars, he wanted to be in California where the buyers are. Now that he's selling a pickup truck, he wants to move to the heartland where those buyers are. And it's really as simple as that. Anyway, that's kind of an interesting curve fitting to what he has done.
For the people who don't know in this room, because I know there's a lot of international people, Texas has no state income tax. We have income taxes at the federal level. We have income taxes at a state level. Some cities even have an income tax, like New York and Philadelphia, on top of the state
LA. Yeah.
tax. Well, LA doesn't have an income tax.
I got taxed when I was in. I had some kind of LA tax when I
But
was there.
it's not an income tax.
There's a nominal LA business tax.
It's a
Yeah.
business tax, yeah, but
Yeah.
it's not an income tax. Okay,
Yeah.
but the Texas has no state income tax, and California probably has one of the highest state income taxes in the country. So, however, I'm going to tell you this because I know, having left California and dealt with all of this stuff, the California tax authorities will follow him all around the world and claim that certain profits are California source income, and and he'll end up litigating stuff for God knows how long. Um, So it's not even necessarily a great tax. It may not even save him that many taxes on stuff that he's already kind of earned, which is a lot of money already, because they'll claim it's all California source income, and therefore, even if he moves to a not a state without an income tax, he owes the money. So I mean, that's the issue of being in California. He should have actually thought about moving to Texas a long time ago, before it became that valuable. Um, anyway, I don't think this issue is that interesting that it's worth this much time. That's my own view. But anyway, bye.
Next up is Microsoft and Facebook partner to integrate the Facebook workplace content into Microsoft Teams and plans to integrate Teams video meetings into Workplace. So they go both directions, bi-directional partnership there between Facebook and Microsoft Teams. And Instagram is testing something called Take a Break, an opt-in feature that reminds users to take a break after 10, 20, or 30 minutes. Instagram head Adam Sari announced today the company has begun testing a new feature this week called Take a Break, which will allow users to remind themselves to take a break after 10, 20, or 30 minutes. And he has tweeted saying, "We started testing a new feature called Test a Break this week. This opt-in control enables you to receive break reminders in-app after a duration of your choosing. I'm excited to dig into the results and hopefully launch this sometime in December." The next one is that Disney misses its Q4 estimates. After slower streaming service growth, Disney Plus added 2 million subscribers to 118 million. Hulu added 700,000 to 39.7 million. ESPN Plus added 2 million to 17.1 million. And indeed, it's getting saturated. There's less low-hanging fruit on that tree. Pretty much everyone has signed up for their streaming services of choice. And that means they need to go to new territories or create new products and services, like Netflix is doing both. They're going into games and into Africa and things like that.
So Tyler,
Yeah.
that was actually telegraphed a little bit. That they were going to have some soft numbers on Disney Plus. Um, I actually listened to the call. I believe they're now saying, I forgot what the date is. Maybe let's call it a year and a half from now, depending on not depending on, but based on what content they have coming up. New movie releases and stuff. They expect the Disney Plus numbers will eventually go back up. Okay, but it's dependent on new releases to attract people to the platform. Um, so, but it wasn't exactly. I don't think it was exactly shocking. Maybe the magnitude a little bit that they were a little soft on the Disney Plus numbers. Um, what is interesting about Disney Plus, by the way, because I know we have people from India and everything, is their numbers when they give them are the international numbers. They charge a lot less for Disney Plus in India than which is a big market for them because of Hotstar. Okay, um, than they charge in the United States. Okay, and the average revenue per subscriber for Disney Plus is only $4 and change because of how little they charge overseas. For those of us who know what they charge here in the United States, and in fact, that number actually went down. Their ARPU went down on Disney Plus a little bit this quarter by their acknowledgement because of a higher mix coming from India. Now they refuse to break out exactly what the ARPUs are per country and stuff, but it's very clear because they do give you an ARPU number, and we it's so far south of what the is charged in the United States that that international is way lower. I didn't think it was that bad of a quarter. They seem to be doing nicely in all their businesses. You're going to get these little fluctuations. And Disney Plus, by the way, people forget Disney Plus has more subscribers now than anyone ever thought they would have at this time. Nobody, including the company, ever thought Disney Plus would take off as fast as it did. So obviously the pandemic, kind of helped. And the biggest issue that keeps coming up, the controversial issue within Hollywood, is about what are they doing with releases into the cinema, and how long should the window be in terms of the exclusive release into the traditional cinema. That's probably still the more controversial stuff. And I'm done speaking.
So the next one is from CNBC, that the EU's court has upheld the $2.4 billion fine against Google, which was brought in 2017 for abusing search engine dominance by promoting its own shopping service. And this is classic EU versus US big tech. Margaret Vestager, who's the Danish lady in charge of making these kinds of rulings against big tech, the crackdown against US big tech in the EU. The point is, if Google's operating in the EU, Europe wants to make sure that their own European e-commerce portals, like Zalando, there's tons of them, are getting a fair shake against Google when it comes to e-commerce. And if Google is giving an unfair advantage to its own Google Shopping, the EU doesn't like that. You're taking money away from our startups. And so they did a 2.4 billion euro fine in 2017. Google appealed it, and now the EU General Court has upheld it. So they're going to have to pay that fine. The next one is that a startup called Sandbox VR, which offers VR experiences at a dozen retail locations worldwide, that's 12 locations, has raised $37 million, led by Andreessen Horowitz. And a UK Supreme Court, or the UK Supreme Court, dismisses a lawsuit against Google that was looking for $4 billion for allegedly tracking iOS Safari users without their consent. The Supreme Court sides with Google, in this case seeking $4 billion. Tech giant Google was accused of breaching its data collection duties. The next one is Valve delays the Stream Deck from December 2021 to February 2022, citing supply chain issues. There goes Christmas for a bunch of kids who were waiting for the Valve Stream Deck. And online food delivery platform Zomato invests $175 million across Indian startups ShipRocket, CureFit, and MagicPin, and plans to invest $1 billion in startups over 2 years. Online food delivery platform Zomato announced $175 million investment across this. Now, what's interesting here is Zomato is buying up smaller delivery companies. These delivery companies are popping up like weeds all over the planet. And you have some very big players like Instacart, like DoorDash, like Uber Eats. And those big players realize they can't grow fast enough into every market on the planet. So they're going to start acquiring a process known as consolidation. And we saw it yesterday where my friends from Volt just sold to DoorDash for $8 billion because they've got the kind of a head start in the Nordics. And DoorDash wants to get into the Nordics. Obviously, the DoorDash and Uber Eats and Instacart and Zomato and the big players need to start consolidating and with all of the smaller players that are in the in the other markets. So the next one is Google launches something called Project Relate, a beta Android app for English speakers with speech impairments, so that they can use Google Assistant and Google Translate and things like that. So even if you have, an impairment in speaking English, the Google Assistant should be able to understand you. If for folks who might have autism or Down syndrome or all kinds of impairments, Google Assistant should still be able to understand you and even translate what you're saying into text, or transcribe what you're saying into text, so that if you're talking with somebody who doesn't understand you, you can talk to your phone and then show them on your phone, much like people do when they're traveling internationally across languages. So it's a very cool use of a voice AI translation.
So will they be able to translate my sharp comments into diplomatic segments?
Add some PC language to
It's not that powerful, Cheryl.
no AI can do that.
Kegel.
Yeah. The next one is at a startup called Density, which sells occupancy tracking tech to businesses, including machine learning powered radar sensors, raises 125 million. So this is all about tracking footfall, as it's called in the retail industry. The next one is that Twitter will no longer crop photo previews on the web after a similar update on iOS and Android in May, following claims of bias in its auto cropping algorithm. So this is funny. So what happens is people upload photos to Twitter, and then Twitter has to figure out, okay, we can't show the whole photo, we can only show part of the photo, and then people can click on that little preview of the photo to see the whole photo. The question is, which part of the photo should they select as the preview? Well, probably the part of the face. Well, what if you have two faces, one at the top of the photo, one at the bottom of the photo? Which face do you show? And it turns out if you make these really unnatural tests where you have a very, very long image and you put a white face at the top and a black face at the bottom, which one is it going to crop to show as the preview image? And what if it's a male face? What if it's a female face? What if it's, people did tons of these tests, and it turns out in these tests that it tends to more recognize, I believe, Caucasian faces and perhaps male faces. I don't honestly recall. But the point is, if it can't do it perfectly equally, then you shouldn't do it at all. So Twitter's totally scrapping this, and now you get no preview at all. You get, just whatever's right smack dab in the center of the photo. No more face recognition in the cropping of these. No more auto cropping. And
This
no
is
more
why
auto
you can't
cropping.
have nice things.
Yeah. So the next one is that Zen Business, which says 200,000 entrepreneurs use as an automated tools to form and run businesses, raises 200 million. A startup called Daily, which offers APIs for developers to add video and audio features to apps and websites, raises 40 million. Blink launches in London as a productivity app for frontline workers, raising 20 million. Affirm, who is the buy now, pay later of the US, where they're competing and blatantly ripped off Klarna from Europe, had just done their quarterly earnings with revenue of 269 million versus 248 expected, which that means they handedly beat the estimates. And they're now up growth of 55% year over year. That's very nice. Active consumers up 124% year over year. That's very nice. And the stock jumped 25% after the quarter earnings report. And as many of you know, I'm an Affirm shareholder. And I even got some DMs as soon as the stock jumped 25%, thanking me for bringing this company to their attention. And yeah, well, buy now, pay later is booming, and Klarna is not a public company yet. Affirm is. So if you want to bet on buy now, pay later, you don't have a lot of choices of publicly traded buy now, pay laters, but Affirm is one. But that's not financial advice. And the next one is Expensify, which offers expense management app for personal and business use, raises 70 million. And that's pretty much your big boring headlines of the day. So now we get into the fun tweets, as we always do. So let's do that. Let me refresh the page, Gerald, to see if there's any new ones that have come in since we started today. Doesn't appear so. Okay, so we get to go into the tweets, like this one from Nalormi. Shares this one from Wired that I just tweeted about Beeple. And Beeple, you might remember that name because he really, sold the first big breakout NFT, which I'm trying to remember the name of it, but he sold it for $69 million in what appears to be a very legitimate sale.
1,500 days or something like that.
Yeah, it
The
had a name like that.
first, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was the first one. It was the big one, though. I mean,
that's what I mean. It was the one that got all the headlines, and it
that,
brought.
that,
Wasn't it the first one traded by Christie's or like by like a big,
Yeah,
auction
well,
house? I
maybe
think
not.
that was the thing.
That's Ken's point. Is it might not have been the actual first, but it was the first one that drove popularity of NFTs.
It was
I
his
still give a
digital
lot of
art. It was
I still
his
give a lot of
500
credit.
days of digital art. And
Yes,
it was the
500
first
days.
NFT that he did.
Yeah. Well, my point here is that NFTs, of course, it predated. He didn't make the first NFT by any means, but it was the first NFT that really got a lot of headlines and a whole lot of headlines, and it brought the concept of it. It almost singularly popularized the concept of NFTs for a lot of people.
I
And
want to give credit to Justin Blau, the DJ who sold
sure,
a bunch of NFTs on this platform,
yep,
because he raised, I mean, not that kind of money, but he
yeah,
raised a couple of $1 million, and that got
I
a lot
think
of
10,
attention.
yeah,
Yeah, Ken, I was in that room when Blau dropped it back beginning of this app because I've been in since December of last year, and Blau and Paris Hilton are friends. And I was in that room where he dropped his single, and he actually made $11 million off of that single. So you're absolutely correct. It was Blau first that made that big impact on a single in terms of music. However, in terms of digital art, as you said, Tyler, Beeple is a digital artist, and he has been really doing digital art for hundreds of days. And that piece was specifically all his digital art from every day for the past like 500 plus days. And it was minted as an NFT, and it was sold to the pair of Tubador. It was bought by the Metapurse. I believe it was a Metacoven, who's the other half of the Metapurse fund, which is a $60 billion fund that is Indian. So it's two gentlemen only. And one looks for the art and the other one makes the purchase. And Metacoven purchased it for 69 million if I'm not mistaken.
okay.
And the only press that they did was here on Clubhouse, or the only
Correct.
interview.
Yep. The only thing they did here was on Clubhouse. That was pure community. Metacoven sent in Tubador. Tubador came in and like literally made the confirmation of it was just so freaking crazy fast and crazy amazing because the excitement of bringing this space to life with a digital artist. Tyler, as you said, he's been doing digital art for a long time. And this was his first piece of artwork where he was paid in Ethereum, which he had since cashed out. And there was also a big drama of him not being sort of really supportive of the NFT space because he didn't hold on to his Ethereum, he sold it. So, but if you imagine, had he held on to that Ethereum, the value of that amount that he made would have been about 3 times the amount had he held on to it.
So the new piece that we just sold for $29 million is called For the Rest of My Life because, as he says, unlike his first piece, which was called The First 5,000 Days, this new piece, it's a work that will change over time. While the piece was sold last night, the piece is not complete. I'm going to continue changing and updating the piece for the rest of my life, hence the name For the Rest of My Life. He thinks this is one of the boons of digital art. While paintings and sculptures are static and don't change after being purchased, with digital art, you're buying something that can evolve. Art connoisseurs may not even know what they're buying at first. Something Winkleman, the creator, known as Beeple, likens to a subscription to art, like using Microsoft 360 or Adobe's Creative Cloud. You could come downstairs in the morning and the piece looks one way. Then you come home from work and it looks another way. You might even love it one day and hate it the next. He calls it Human One, which features a human or human-like figure walking in a tall box that can be viewed from 360 degrees in a video. So it's a three-dimensional, 360-degree video. He's not planning on updating it on a daily basis. He wants it to be purposeful and for it to be an event when it changes. He doesn't have the next 30 years of the piece planned out, but we'll figure it out as he goes. This piece is about the journey and exploring, he says, and that's what I'm also on the ride for.
So,
Tyler,
yeah,
that's a very interesting thing that he's doing. And I'll put on my smart contract developer hat on for a moment. And I'm
Yeah.
actually helping someone helping someone create the code to glitch their art over time and bring it back to its original form. So what Beeple is doing manually by making it Beeple, who's making those changes within a selected period of time, there's something called generative art, which would allow you to code that into those smart contracts, because the contracts are super dynamic and can be. And that's what makes them called smart contracts. They're dynamic. They can be adjusted. You could do different code to make different execution, you could make artwork be aged. You could make art, you could put time arrays on it. So what he said about whether you don't like the artwork or not, it's interesting because this is what generative projects are now starting to, the next generation is, can I age the artwork by the code that's behind the contract? Can I glitch the artwork based on the code in the contract? And absolutely you could do those things, which is what's really fascinating me, is that he's doing something manually that the generative art world for the past 3-4 months since these generative projects of 10,000 collectibles have been dropping, they're doing it already. He just is choosing to do that same process manually and not as often and not under a schedule. But it's really fascinating to see how much he had the provenance, the authenticity, and the ownership of what he's doing, and it's tagging connected back to him. So in some ways, indirectly, he's quote unquote tokenizing himself, because he's making himself available to all those art collectors that he is giving his word that he will be updating it, obviously, till he drops dead, with all due respect.
Okay, can I ask a
so,
And then,
question? What if
MA,
oh,
actually,
Eli, go ahead.
yeah.
what
So,
if he accidentally passed away tomorrow?
well, if I can jump in
He's
quickly.
going to
Sure,
update it
LS,
from
go
heaven.
ahead.
He's going to update it from heaven, Cheryl.
Well, no,
Yeah,
he
I hope
won't. He
so.
won't. No, sure, he won't update it from heaven. But what
Correct.
we're really talking about, if I can simplify, and it's intriguing to me, is what Ma said. It's a smart contract, but you are talking about this actually crosses over to a metaverse sort of devs, discrete event
Correct.
system specifications. I know. I just want to finish for the room, Ma. Me and you know this. So let's imagine, Tyler, like you have this frame, right, on your wall, like you're rich or whatever. And in order for that to be updated and to be authenticated, it would need to be a tokenization of a smart contract. But it would stream to, like, a metaverse. So you don't have to be wearing gargles or anything. It's streaming to your smart house. And that art will change, but you need to know it's originally from the artist, and it'll be distributed on a network, a very private network. So you're actually able to visualize. I'm talking about in your real physical house, hanging on the wall, 8x8 frame that's already digitally connected, but it updates itself. And you will get the latest artists. And that's why I think NFTs will grow and all these other things. But a lot of this has to do with AGI and everything else behind it in smart contracts. And I think that's why the infrastructure bill is doing this with Bitcoin and tokenization, because they can see where this world is going, where you're talking about it's just a whole new world, right? So it's not a Van Gogh. It's like, and to Cheryl's point, Van Gogh's dead and all these artists are dead. But if they're living artists and they're redistributing, you don't have to go to the gallery. It's just, you just invite people to your home, whether it's COVID or not, and you're like, here's my latest piece. Let's watch it stream live, on my frame, on my wall, and it's real and it's authenticated, and you're done. But that still will be a taxable event as far as governments are concerned.
Ellie, you have something to say?
yeah, I just wanted to ask Amy if she thought it was worth going into the question I raised with her over.
Eli, it's an interesting question, which is basically what LS was dovetailing on what LS said about security and taxations and stuff. I mean, if we want to keep it very Yip and Yannicka, He's an artist. He's doing a job, right? He's being commissioned. And I believe that from a commissioned artist perspective, he's tokenizing his art skills. I mean, Eli, it sounds like he's literally creating his own UBI, to be quite frank. He's creating his own universal basic income. He's like, screw this, man. I'm going to keep myself relevant by, continuing to do my digital art and getting people to buy and continue to stay engaged. And to LS's point, all he needs to do, if God forbid he passes away, he's a very intelligent man. He probably already has documents in place that if he were to pass away unexpectedly, that there could be already elements in place to protect his art, because that's something that now can be done while you're alive. Whereas Van Gogh, when he died, why do artists have to die before they become famous, But now it's quite interesting how he can definitely be proactive about how that's managed after he dies. And also so no one does what they've done to Jean-Michel Basquiat's work, that they're constantly going after the estate of the family, trying to steal his sketches and stuff and try to sell them underneath the family's estate. So, and I know the family, so I'm just saying he's protecting his legacy for sure if he's already got that in place. So security-wise, tax-wise, I just see it as he's creating his work.
So I meant this in the SEC sense of security.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I mean, Eli, if this is his work and he's an artist, what does the SEC have to do with it if this is his work? That would be normal taxation as an artist.
Well, but it's regulation of sale of securities. That's the issue that would be invoked. That's the problem. That
Yeah,
I agree, Eli.
hopefully
They're going to tax it triply. I agree, Eli.
yeah,
They will triple tax it. So you're correct. The movement of the transaction at every single time, Eli, will
makes
be a
sense.
taxable event.
but
It will.
not just that registration.
Oh
Registration
yes.
of what?
No. Who
Registration
owns
or
it? Who
exemption.
bought it? Yeah. I agree, Eli.
Correct. It's going to be, that's KYCing right there, because everyone's going to know who owns his artwork. So he's going to, all those collectors will be the ones that will be tagged, because all those collectors are moving his artwork back and forth.
If I was the artist, I would set up a DAO, have the DAO own the artwork on a smart contract and distribute it that way.
Yeah, Craig, the challenge is you made a really, really spot on statement. The challenge there is that Beeple is not very crypto savvy. He's not very savvy. And he even said it in an interview himself right after he was in the room when that was dropped, because I was in that room. He even commented on it. He was like, I don't freaking know any of this. He's like, I don't understand any of this. And he didn't seem, he's, I think 42 years old, 43 years old. It's just not his jam. He just did not want to wrap himself around understanding this space. But you're right, Craig. Maybe there's someone in his camp that could help guide and sort of suggest or strategize with him. But that takes someone to be inside his camp. And when I saw him talking with his family inside the app, I'm like, wow, man, he doesn't even want any part of this space. It wasn't him. And that's where we may think something, but the artist has to be in that space, in that vibrational frequency, to sit there and understand how to activate it for themselves and their family.
I think it's interesting how he's moved from the NFT space into the physical art market, with installations.
Yes.
I think this has repercussions. I mean, I don't know enough about the tax implications, but certainly some of those will go away. I don't know how NFTs are seen. Are they seen as a speculative asset,
Nope.
like sort of cryptocurrencies? But
Nope.
certainly I think this is a smart move, because he's got a brand now, pushes into installation, physical artwork, and he's in the real world, which means, he's no longer tethered to cryptocurrency payments, by and large. I'm assuming this $29 million from the Swiss buyer in the latest auction, but this was all in cryptocurrencies, was it?
Not 100% sure. Tyler, was it in the article? Does it say if it was paid in fiat or crypto from Switzerland? Does it give that descriptor?
I'm reading it here in the Wired article.
But Jonathan,
And one thing, I'm sorry, man. One thing, I don't think. I just want to. This is LS. I just want to make my point. I don't think they care. See, what I'm saying is a different point, and it may you know that. But crypto doesn't always mean anonymity. I think a lot of people are okay with it. Like, I want you to
Yeah,
know
I
I bought
think
this shit,
I
and I
agree.
don't care. I'll pay the tax. But like Elon would be like, yeah, I paid it. I bought it. That's me.
Correct.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Now
Well,
come
there's
see
a
it in my
number of
house.
there's a number of very wealthy billionaires that, like, I mean, I could stalk their wallets right now and I could tell you what they have as NFTs. They're not hiding it. You just have to be savvy enough to know who they are and where their wallets are sitting. But as they say, it's hidden in plain sight. These folks' wallets, they're you can see them. They're on the blockchain. There's nothing hidden. And quite frankly, I think it's the people that are trying to hide shit that are going to be the ones that people will go after 5 times harder. Because I think a lot of people are just doing what they love. I don't think they're sort of doing any nefarious stuff, especially the artists. I mean, come on. For the majority of them are like people that are just super excited to do art and actually be recognized for doing this art that no one probably would ever looked at from
Yeah,
across
and
the
I
globe.
think also in regards to sort of cashing out, so I suspect that there are significant issues in cashing out. You know, what was it, $60 million beforehand, and $29 million. I just wonder how much liquidity there is there. So
Tyler, did you
I quite
find that
like it.
out?
You know, he's creative. He's an artist. He moves from the NFT space into the installation, the physical world, and immediately, you know, he's not dependent on crypto valuations. He can move into now sort of, you know, hard fiat cash.
Well, he did
So
that before, Jonathan. He literally just cashed out the whole amount from ETH to dollars back when he did that Christie's sale. And this human one sold again through Christie's. So my suspicion is, if I had to guess, my suspicion is that the sale was in fiat, but actually, from what I'm understanding from Farouk, who's inside the app, and he's one of the mods in here, who's very, very, he's been there since day one. He's got like some like crazy amount of followers because he's done a lot of drops. He actually said, quoting, another huge moment for NFTs and for the culture we're trying to build with the traditional art world. Keep going, my friends. And he was talking about Beeple's Human One. So Jonathan, you said something very valid about it going into the real world, but he's making a link for the real world and the NFT world by doing this. He's linking it because his first drop was an NFT. His second drop is actually Christie's a live piece of artwork that's going to be changing by his hand. So I think it's actually quite the opposite. He's bringing awareness into the NFT space. And quite frankly, this whole space is going crazy in NFTs and gaming right now in metaverse. It is going mad. I don't think I've seen so much news.
you could acknowledge that he might be looking at it in the opposite way. So as you pointed out, I didn't realize this, that he doesn't really know much about sort of
Correct.
blockchain technologies and the technology behind NFTs. It could be the case that actually he's not sure how much life the market has in it. Will it continue to boom? And so therefore a transition back into the physical world means that his brand's protected. If he's just an NFT artist and let's say the market collapse from one day to the next, then that's it. That's all he'll ever be known as. Whereas if
Well,
he transitions into the physical world, you know, he can still say this actual
true,
installation.
but he's not transitioning to the physical world. He's a little bit smarter than that. Tyler, did you see the piece of artwork? He's transitioning to the metaverse. Like,
Yep.
you need to see this artwork. I'm
Yeah, I
going to
agree.
tweet
I
it out.
tweeted it to the
It's
Twitter account.
so fucking dope. Like,
It's
pardon my
unbelievably
French.
cool. Yeah.
It's super cool. And this is what Ellis is saying. It's going into the metaverse. This is not going to go on. Someone in Switzerland sees this as, I mean, I'm looking at it and it's completely sick. Like, I love it. Like, if I had that kind of money, I would buy it. It's brilliant what he's done. And
Yeah.
this is skipping over in real life and it's going into the metaverse.
Yeah.
So it's highly liquid, Jonathan. He can sell his artwork, and then if he wants to swap out of the Ethereum-based NFT, he can do that to fiat or a stable coin. But really, he's being silly stupid with his money. He should be borrowing against the ETH if he wants fiat money, not cashing out. That's what creates the taxable event.
Yeah, I don't know enough about that, but I would imagine if there is a tax implication, then you know he's receiving. You know, if it's an asset, it's classed as such. If he gets taxed 3 times, Jesus, I mean, you know, it goes for $30 million, and he walks away with maybe sort of $10 million maximum. Still nice money, but I mean, overall, I have my doubts about people, but I agree. This latest work sort of strikes me very much in the same way when I saw sort of Damien Hirst's, cow in formaldehyde
Yep.
and those installations. So it does make you think, sort of step back and think. I'm not so sure I'm convinced about the whole metaverse hype, but as a piece of art, it's interesting and it's engaging, and that's what art's about.
What would be amazing?
Tyler,
Yeah, hold on. It would be. I completely agree with you, Jonathan. It has a Damien Hirst kind of vibe to it, although a very modern, you know, uh, you know, a geek version of Damien Hirst.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, look, Damien Hirst has become very stale and boring, and formulaic, and art's not meant to be like that. And so, at
Right.
least someone new is on the scene
Yeah.
doing something new and in a digital sense.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. What I think would take it to the next level, which you could still do after the fact, and that's what's so interesting about it, is if this piece also existed in the metaverse, so that you could you don't have to go see it physically. You can put on an Oculus headset and go watch it in the metaverse, and then they coexist um, physically and digitally, so that when does get updated, it's updated in both places simultaneously, and then that it becomes a whole new element of art in a way, which is
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, Tyler. I mean, the point I make about the metaverse is I'm talking about sort of mass market proposition with heavy headsets and sort of motion sickness and all the other things that go with it at the moment.
And
Maybe they'll be
Jonathan,
maybe they'll be addressed, but I
Jonathan,
get that. I mean, I recently sat in front of Dune, because of the cinematography, a completely immersive experience. I mean, if I could have that in a virtual reality environment for an hour and a half, yeah, I'd definitely sign up for it.
and Jonathan, just imagine though that sooner than later, in my opinion, you don't have to put on goggles. It's a certain screen that's on your wall, so no one needs to wear anything, and they come to your house and they can see it.
Tyler,
yeah,
there's something very interesting about this, and I was just chatting with a couple in the audience, a couple of people in the audience, because there's always something very interesting, and I know Ken's probably going to comment on it again, but not in a bad way, because we love you, Ken. In Switzerland, it's similar to Netherlands. There is no capital gains tax. There's wealth tax. And when we start looking at those little narratives, why do you think so many people, when they collect art, where they're collecting from? I mean, the second artist that sort of has had a major, major coup as well, Tyler, is the digital artist, Misha Klein, who's born in 1964, who had some really, really powerful exhibits in London, like back in the day. And he's the creator of the crypto pills, and he's Dutch, living in, I think, Hong Kong. I'm not sure if I think he lives in Hong Kong. But my point is that it's really fascinating to see how these digital artists some of them of yesteryear, or older digital artists, I'm actually commending them, that they're really powerfully taking this space by storm and saying, I'm going to take it on board. I'm going to find a way to connect in there, one way or the other. And they're doing it, like Misha Klein. Beeple's like in his 40s. Misha Klein's, what is he now? He's going to be 60 or something. I don't know how old he is. He's in 64, so he's probably like 60 years old or something. I don't know. I can't do the math so quickly in my head on that one. But
57.
thank you, sir. But that's the thing that's very interesting, because even Gary Vaynerchuk, who was in the app as well in the beginning, in January and February of this year, he had his people inside the app as well. Gary Vee was in the app. They were going balls to the wall to pick up information and data on the NFTs. And when he left the app, he had all his team from Vaynerchuk Media inside all these NFT rooms. And look at him. He's like literally going completely nuts, investing in these companies through venture capital firms as well. So when I see that this space is growing. And I have to respectfully disagree about the metaverse, but the metaverse is coming hard and fast. I think the challenge is that wrapping yourself around it right now is difficult, because it's such also a generational thing, because there's a lot of young people that are like for example, Victoria, our Queen Victoria, She loves AR, VR. We used to have those VR, AR rooms in the beginning back in the day. And she was also ahead of her time in what she was doing and what she was designing and building. And that's what we're going towards. And it's never about what we have in the front of our face. It's what we could see in the distance. So the challenge here is, can we be a bit more projecting into the forecast of what the possibility is going to look like in 5-10 years? Because I see it as massive when you start seeing all these hotels of the future needing to get their styled hotels, and they could carry different artwork without ever having to pay for a shipping and crate cost or a customs duty to bring in the piece of artwork. That's a big challenge. I studied art history for 4 years. My mom worked in import-export in New York City and JFK and Newark Airport. It is a bitch to bring in artwork. It is a bitch to bring in artwork across the country borders to display it in someone's hotel, someone's private home. It is just a bureaucratic administration nightmare. That's why not a lot of people do it. But when you start to see that this could revolutionize and democratize and decolonize how artwork is shared across the globe and presented without impacting the environment by it being flown over or it being crated and shipped. So there's a lot of disruption in the process here as well.
Okay. So let's get into more tweets here. New York Times article headline says, Amazon on the high seas. Amazon racing to get products from factories to our homes in time for Christmas, in time for the holidays and Christmas, lures merchants with chartered cargo ships. So Amazon has to take control of the actual ships to make sure the stuff arrives. Not a surprise. They're also taking control of the airplanes. They're really getting huge into it. I mean, Amazon started out reliant on FedEx and UPS, and now they have their own trucks. And then they were reliant on the big container ships going between the Atlantic and the Pacific, and now they're taking over the ships. They were reliant on the airplanes. Now they're taking over the airplanes. They're now watch how this plays out. Eventually, they will take over the factories. This is inevitable. Do we not
But
see?
Tyler,
Yes.
yeah, but Tyler, to point and MA's point, we will follow COP26 at some point. So even Amazon, if they continue to grow and expand, will have to lower their carbon footprint. And so when you start thinking about digital or metaverse or where we're really going, whether we agree or not, I just, I've talked about this before. I just think we're going to shift from where the world, we're not shipping so much physical footprint, so to speak. And that has to do with, I think it was Gans, the Glasgow's Finance Alliance or something that said they would commit $130 trillion in the next 10 to 20 years of investing in companies that did not create a carbon footprint. And that's 130 trillion with a T. So that was the alliance that came out of COP26, I believe last week. And this is the financial companies, not the governments, that said they would put forth 130 trillion with a T collectively in the next 10 years that did something that, did not make the environment worse than what it is today. So when you start looking at these trend lines, and it's something I do, but when you look at these trend lines, you're looking at a whole different shift than what we were. And I always say this, right? We all are here. Thank God it's Clubhouse. We're friends, but we're on an app from the iPhone. The iPhone was only 2007. So for those of us that's older, before that, we were, using these physical things and Blackberries and texting. So without the iPhone and other smartphones, with the sliding glass, you couldn't have the App Store. You couldn't have the whole ecosystem. You couldn't see those trends prior to that. And I think we're going through this again. That's all.
Check this out. This next article, unrelated but directly related. I just tweeted it out to the Twitter account. It says, what Norwegians are learning as they pioneer autonomous ships. Norway's leading the world in developing autonomous ship technology, and the world should pay attention to its latest developments. And I say this is related because if Amazon, just like they took over FedEx and UPS for the trucking of the goods, in the cities and across cities, and now they're going to take over the ships, from China or wherever the goods are made to wherever they're going, into the Europe or the US, and you have these massive Amazon container ships. Well, just like the trucks that are doing the deliveries, they're already testing autonomous truck deliveries. This article is all about autonomous ships. So Norway is leading the world in developing autonomous ships, and the world should pay attention. Norway is the perfect place to develop autonomous ships. Norwegians love boats. They love technology, and they love to cooperate. On top of that, autonomous ships have practical applications that could affect the lives of many in Norway. And
I wonder
and
if
many
they're
other
partnering with
places.
the. I wonder if they're partnering with a Dutch company with that as well, Tyler, because the Dutch also really love their ships, and they're really good at building out sort of vessels and stuff. I mean, they've got the vessels in Norway, but the Dutch have like this crazy love of boats and water and sea. And I would be curious to see if they're going to collaborate with anyone in Holland. But then again, we won't have a crowded Suez Canal then.
one of the big issues at the moment is that the people who operate, who work on these container ships, no longer want to, and they collectively wrote a letter to all of the world's leaders at the UN General Assembly saying that because of all of this container ship shitstorm that's brewing, which really ignited based on the what was the Evergreen boat that was in the Suez Canal, and that kind of really tipped everything into a downward spiral.
The one that
And
got stuck is what you mean, Tyler, right?
yep, yes,
The one that was stuck, yeah.
yep. And the point is, now you've got these ships that are stranded off of the ports for sometimes weeks and in some cases months. And this is totally causing absolute economic havoc in the lives of the people on those vessels, because they're used to doing these very predetermined contracts. It's going to be a 10-day journey or a 20-day journey, and then I'm going to go on to the next job and the next job and the next job, almost like Uber, gigs where, how long it's going to take. And now they don't. Now they're being stuck on a ship for 2 months that they can't get off. It's like a floating prison, and they can't be home for Christmas and the kids' birthdays, and enough is enough, and they're stopping. And that's where these autonomous ships could become incredibly interesting, especially Amazon being Amazon, of course, will be the leader of that for sure, and could give them a real asymmetric advantages, especially if they start buying. By the way, there's only a 1,000 or so of these massive container ships, and they could conceivably take a significant percentage of them and monopolize a bit of the global logistics in doing so, which would work against everybody else and potentially so give themselves
And
a
it
bit of
would
an
be
advantage.
a tremendous, interesting time to jump in right now because the industry is trying to shift to biofuel, but it takes, like, I don't know, 20 or 30 years before the ship is ready for renewal. So if you're going in and buying new ships now, you should absolutely buy them running on biofuel because that's also what the customers want. So that could be super, super interesting and a competitive advantage if they kind of enter now with new ships.
So the next one is from Manaz, and the headline says, "Why reversing aging will transform medicine and society." Well, I think we know that will happen. And there is a lot of progress happening in labs. That's most notably at Harvard and UCLA of reversing aging. I know that sounds science fiction, but it's happening in labs with mice. So it says, likely the biggest breakthrough in medicine of all time will be the reversal of the aging process. The reasons for this are logical and straightforward, but are still are all too little known. Even by the medical community and pharmaceutical companies, medicine and human health in general has been notoriously difficult to disrupt. It says, likely medicine and human health in general has been notoriously difficult to disrupt. In other words, medicine and our health needs disruption. The disruption is coming in the form of fascinating new technologies like gene editing transcriptomic drugs, novel gene therapies, AI, improved cell therapies, organ printing, and so on. However, the biggest disruption will likely come from reversing aging. There are several reasons why making people younger again will transform medicine, our health, and our society as a whole. The first reason is that reversing aging will likely be the most powerful and effective way to prevent and treat aging-related diseases. After all, aging is the main and most important cause of aging-related diseases like heart disease, cancers, Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, macular degeneration, osteoarthritis, aging-related decline in kidney function, and so on. So the same processes that cause these diseases cause aging. By targeting aging, we target the root cause of these diseases. These aging processes are, for example, epigenetic changes, protein accumulation, mitochondrial dysfunction, and decline of DNA repair, an increase in sentient cells, and so on. Unfortunately, how these processes cause aging is hardly taught in medical school. Many medical doctors still think that aging and aging-related diseases are two distinct processes. They consider aging a natural process, while heart disease is caused by a disease process, like accumulation of cholesterol-filled immune cells in the blood vessel wall. However, these disease processes are caused by a deeper-rooted process, which encompasses aging itself. In a similar unfortunate vein, governments spend billions of dollars to cure individual aging-related diseases, but hardly invest any money into addressing the root cause of all of these diseases, which is aging. This is not a good way to spend valuable tax money. Even if we could suddenly cure all heart disease, people would only live 2.8 years longer, given they will then die of another age-related disease like Alzheimer's, cancer, and pneumonia due to the aging-related decline of the immune system. A second reason why reversing aging will cause the medical field will change the medical field is because it really will be medicine, not only making people better, but helping to achieve their best health possible instead of just treating disease or slowing down the inexorable decline of our bodies. We will strive for optimum health. With aging, one can still be considered healthy while nonetheless tiring more easily, hearing and seeing less well, muscles withering away, and skin becoming increasingly thin and wrinkly. We have trouble with balance, we have foggy memories, and we suffer from many other ailments that, if we would suddenly happen to a young person, would be labeled as a disease. Yet these ailments are currently considered to be perfectly normal just as long as you're old. If we could partially reverse aging, we could bring people back to their full metabolic and physiological potential as they had when they were younger. This would be the epitome of medicine, achieving the best health possible, not just the reduced health we take for granted when we get older. So the next one is from Joe Williams, and the audience shares this one from New Atlas. The headline reads, Spin Launch, rocket-free kinetic launch system conducts first test flight. For more than half a century, we've been sending vehicles and humans into space with the help of rockets. But what if there was another way? A startup called Spin Launch has been exploring such possibilities through the development of what it calls the world's first kinetic space launch system, and it's recently completed its first test. Spin Launch has been developing its alternative launch system since 2015, imagining a future where satellites and spacecraft can escape the Earth's atmosphere with zero emissions. It aims to achieve this with the help of a giant accelerator powered by an electronic drive that it says could cut fuel use by 4 times and then costs by 10 times compared to traditional rocket launches, while also firing multiple payloads into orbit each day. Initially, it is pursuing these ambitions through its suborbital accelerator. This consists of an upright disc-shaped vacuum chamber slightly taller than the Statue of Liberty that uses a carbon fiber tether to whip a projectile around to speeds of 5,000 miles per hour, many times the speed of sound, before releasing it through a launch tube and upward through the atmosphere. A larger system, the L100 Orbital Mass Accelerator, would operate on a similar principle, and it's being developed to launch satellites weighing up to 200 kilograms or 440 pounds. The company says advances in electronics that enable relatively small capacitors, chips, and resistors allow these components to be ruggedized to survive the 10,000 Gs in the fast-spinning launch chamber, and its testing has proven satellite systems are capable of enduring such conditions. So it's essentially a slingshot, or a, in the old traditional type where you spin a rock at the end of a rope and then launch the rock, but you have to get that thing spinning incredibly quickly and then launch the rock into a tube up into space. So, like firing it out of a cannon, kind of a wild concept. Kinetic launch system. So
Straight out of I forget the film, 1930s film. What was it called? Things to Come.
Okay, so Hyundai reveals plans for self-flying taxis by 2028. I'm tweeting it now from our friend Evan to the Tech News Twitter account, and you can see this vertical takeoff and landing electric taxi, autonomous flying taxis, self-flying electric taxis that take off up and down vertically. And Hyundai is one of a dozen players in this space, but they're certainly very serious about it. Honda also just announced their interest in this space, but there's several players. And Portugal makes it illegal for your boss to text you after work. There you go. As they cater to the global digital nomads. Even more with that one. Korea, Aaron shares this one that we discussed when we met 12 hours ago. Korea, on the bleeding edge of technology, Seoul will be the first city government to establish a metaverse platform where citizens can meet with avatar officials, visit reproduced landmarks, and more. Korea in the metaverse. The question is, how will they govern it? How will they tax it? Discord pushes pause on exploring crypto and NFTs amid user backlash. Discord, which is started out as a gaming community chat area where they stream live games and talk about them anyway. So the Discord founder and CEO Jason sought to reassure users on Wednesday that the company doesn't have impending plans to shift its business towards NFTs. And I remember I had a thought yesterday when we were talking about Korea in the metaverse, which is the idea that big tech companies are often thought of as kind of being government-like in their scale and all of their policies and their taxation. And the metaverse is conceivably a big open, it's almost, one way to think of it is like Columbus discovering the new world. It's a massive piece of digital geography that is currently not really owned by anybody, although we're seeing headlines even in the past 48 hours that Pokemon Go's parent company Niantic is creating a platform to build environments in the metaverse. And then there was one yesterday, NVIDIA is making a new platform. Facebook has their platform. Of course, Google and Apple are going to have their platforms. And there's a big difference, though, which is the new world, meaning America, has a terminal geography, meaning it's not limitless. It's limited in its geography. So, and that entire geography has now been claimed. In fact, every piece of land on the planet has been claimed. So your only option is to float in the international waters, essentially. And there's a battle for Antarctica and in the Arctic at the moment. But the moon, conceivably, and Mars is conceivably unclaimed. But more realistically, the metaverse is permanently scalable. So you could have countries like Korea setting up shop in the metaverse, and you could have big tech companies setting up shop in the metaverse, and Apple will have an app store in the metaverse, and if you want to be part of their island in the metaverse, you're going to have to pay their taxes. And Korea might itself tell all Korean businesses that they must register with their island in the metaverse, and they must pay those taxes in the metaverse in Korea, and they might have their own laws that how you operate, which are very similar to company policies. So if you want to participate in Google's little island of the metaverse, then you're beheld by their policies, and you go over to Twitter Island and you have to behave, and the speech that you're able to use in Twitter's version of the metaverse is in accordance with their legal policies. And then if you're over in, Korea's island of the metaverse, then Korea sets the policies and laws for what's acceptable speech and what is punishable in the metaverse. But the idea is, uniquely, what the really interesting point is, there's parts of the metaverse that are not ownable by anybody. Where
Hey,
it's
Tyler.
hold on. This is the climactic moment here, which is we have potentially for the first time the possibility of truly self-sovereign territory to create conceivably the utopian dream where people can behave fully self-sovereign autonomously in their own utopia, and people can create their own Burning Man like worlds conceptually. So anyways, go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, the only part I'm not following is what is the connection between, let's say, the Korean metaverse or the Twitter metaverse and the real world? Is that where the servers are lying or something else?
But this is where the need for a self-sovereign identity, blockchain-based ability for you to prove who you are as you transition from island to island in the metaverse or from experience to experience, because it's going to be even more important to prove who you are in the metaverse because we're going to be using avatars. So you're going to need to prove definitely, concretely, who you are. And because of the whole ability for deep fakes and avatars and everything else, proof of identity is going to become incredibly important and paramount in the metaverse. And so it's going to need to happen outside of any one of those islands. You're going to need to have a unifying identity system, which essentially no company controls, because you have every company in the metaverse. You're going to want to have a system which is nearly identical to what our friend Nicholas is creating, which is this self-sovereign, almost like Bitcoin for identity, which runs separately from any company. That's the important point, is that it runs autonomously of any company or any government, which is a truly self-sovereign identity that you can give whatever permissions are needed to authenticate yourself in each of those islands. Ellis?
I was just going to say, Tyler, yeah, it's spot on. But to your point and something earlier, actually, and I shouldn't probably speak too much on this, but the moon is actually being, actually, how do I say, colonized by different countries. So China has a certain stake. This has been known, and sort of U.S. DoD issues, but China says they have a certain part of the moon, the U.S. has a certain part, Russia has a certain part. And I'm being very accurate here. I mean, literally, they've already claimed territory. So then when we get to the metaverse, I think we're heading there fast, and I agree with you. And I think, Zuckerberg or Mark and Facebook putting it out there, because there's been a lot of this discussion of when if we go backwards and we didn't think about COVID-19 like Zoom in a digital world, we didn't see, in reality, you couldn't see what was in front of you because everything was physical. But just if you look at climate change, climate migration, COP26, COVID, all of these convergence, part of us who are older will want to believe, oh, it'll go away and go back to normal. No, we're evolving faster. And it's not about the wearables, in my opinion, that's going to stop it. I think it's already built, and I've seen some of it, but I think it will become more ubiquitous. And then you're talking about territorial. So then I've always said this in crypto because I've been in the space for a while. It's like, how would you have a currency or authentication or something secure in space? So you would have to have something that worked. It couldn't just call your bank account and authenticate that it's you, for your at an ATM or something. No matter where you are around the world, you'd have to have something that's secure. Now, security will come from the Bitcoin protocol, not the currency. I'm very clear about that. I'm talking about the technology and the ability to create tokenization, smart contracts, embed smart contracts with quantum machine learning. It's just going to get a lot deeper, and then encode that so that you're still on a peer-to-peer network, But peer to peer could be internationally or actually interspatial. And you still will have that encodedness where it's secure and that identity is there. And then you could just move around and confirm that. And that's, I think we've seen this with artists, right? Like Taylor Swift. Like, why would she sue and then record all of her artists? We talked about this about 8 months ago. Record all of her songs digitally because she wanted the digital rights. Some of these artists they're already ahead of what's coming because they've been told, and that's just my opinion of it.
Hey Tyler,
Yes, Aaron.
can I yeah, I just want to take you back to what you said about the Korea thing
Yeah,
and maybe agree and possibly challenge a couple of
sure.
points.
How dare you, sir?
Um yeah. So first of all, get the easy one out of the way, the agreement. Listen, the metaverse, if anybody has, I'm deep in research, if anybody has come across or heard of Kent Bai, Kent has been doing podcasts for, I think, 14 years now on the topic, and he's done over 1,600 individual podcasts, and the podcast called Voices of VR, and he says in one of the instances
Just getting
about
started. Yeah.
yeah, and he says in one of the instances about Chinese philosophy, the yin and the yang, and how it's a constant battle with the physical, the real things. And what's going to be interesting with the metaverse is about how we can switch between real and unreal, right? Physical, digital, and the flux that we can now explore within that. So you can imagine, to your point, limitless worlds, right? In real life, we have physical, tangible things. There is the moon. It can be colonized. In the metaverse, there's 1 trillion moons, right? So you can just keep on going. It's infinite, right? So the whole point there, I think, is that things will be different, right, in the metaverse. And I don't want to overthink the metaverse either. The metaverse is just an evolution of the internet. That's all it is. That's all it is. It's a web 3.0. It's mobile moving into a different space. It's using same servers, same technology that we have today. It's nothing brand new. So let's not overthink it. And now the challenging points, one is on taxes and one is on identity. I don't think we're going to have much taxation in the metaverse, in the digital native world, because most of us here grew up playing Mario Brothers or Sonic the Hedgehog or whatever, and nobody taxed us on the coins we collected in those games, right? And I'm not just saying it's all gaming. Anything digitally native, in a sense of it's digital only, I believe that regulatory, from the standpoint of metaverse, it will stay digital native. It will have value in a digital world. I don't believe regulators will come in to tax those digital native, right? If it becomes digital and has a physical twin, a digital twin of a physical object, like people's artwork perhaps, then that's what we're calling phygital, PHY. So physical and digital. That's where, governments, taxes, regulatory, etc. will come in. And I think in the same vein, identity, I don't think we're going to have a global identity. We haven't got a global identity in the digital world today, in the real world today, online, e-commerce. I think you're going to have multiple identities still in the metaverse. And I think you'll also have the opportunity to have your identity authenticated. And then there'll be meta worlds where anybody can be anybody. If you want to be anonymous, you can be anonymous. That's the whole preface of the metaverse and the experiences that can happen in there. Anyway.
Surely, if you're wearing a headset, there's the opportunity for you basically to be identified by your EEG. So your brainwave pattern is unique. So I'm assuming that for the metaverse, we need basically a headset. So it's not beyond the wit of man today, basically, to support EEG profiling. And then every time, depending, it doesn't matter whose identity or what avatar you are in the metaverse,
I
your
just want to add
identity will always
one
be known.
dimension to this on that in response, real quickly. I know we're talking about the metaverse, but I think that we should really be talking about the users because the metaverse is going to be infinite. It's never going to be ending, but market dynamics and usability, and then when you go into transactions, right? If you look at the Fortnite and Apple case, you will be taxed for moving items between places. I mean, I don't see how the governments are not going to tax because transactions are going to grow infinitely. So in reality, it's about the ultimate win, which is how many users can you attract?
Some
Jonathan, just to pick up on Jonathan, sorry, Craig, just to pick up on Jonathan's point there about EEG, definitely possible, Jonathan. It's being done today, and not just through Musk with Neuralink. There are many companies in the space of looking at the electrical patterns. But what I would say is, I think what we're talking about here is Web 4.0. Deep in the research on this, we're calling this zero interfaces, where there won't be hardware screens, there won't be monitors and computers and laptops and even phones. There'll be the opportunity to engage the human central nervous system and actually work to that. But to that point, I think you're talking 20 to 25 years away. There's no
But
doubt.
doesn't that frighten you? Doesn't that frighten everybody? I mean, as we see inequalities grow, I mean, I look at this and I see just like a human created matrix. You know, I mean, are we all basically going to jack ourselves in?
Yes, Jonathan.
Maybe governments want that, you know,
Jonathan,
lower
I
the
don't even
living
think it's
standard.
governments. I think it's evolution of human intuition, humans wanting to prove technology is, getting better every single year. I've no doubts that my children will jack themselves into a connected world. And I don't think I have a fear of that. And I don't think we should have a fear of that. I think with humans, we always have this concept of it's either going to be dystopia or utopia. What we've proven to ourselves is over time, we've always landed in the middle of those two. So I think we just need to give ourselves the faith and the courage to say we can build this and we can make sure we keep an eye on it. We'll land in the middle. There will be good, there will be bad, but we'll land in the middle.
And I agree,
I hope so.
Aaron, to your point for one thing, because we can be anonymous now. And so to the metaverse, autonomy and everything, you can go somewhere and have fake IDs, right? So to your point about metaverses, they can always be that, and humans will always create that, regardless of taxable. I mean, just look at it in the real world. Cash or physical currency prior to digital currency and prior to your credit cards and your ATMs and debit, right? If you go back 1940 circa, before the U.S. had the world reserve currency after World War II, you had a lot of this, there was a gold standard even until the 70s. So we always iterate. I mean, I'm saying collectively as humanity, we always iterate, we figure it out, and I agree. I just think we have to balance it, and it doesn't mean you put it in a bottle one way or the other, because it will evolve. And but to the tech point, I don't think it's 20 years away, in my opinion. I think it's much shorter. That's from what
Sorry,
I'm
Ellis.
seeing.
No,
Yeah.
you're spot on. It was the EEG. It's the brainwave. It's the monitoring of somebody that's so sensitive to my central nervous system.
Oh
AR,
yeah,
and I
that's 20 years away. I agree.
correct.
That's
No, so
much longer. That's much longer. But the tech
the
is here now. The other
It,
tech
it,
is here
it,
now.
it is, but the experiences aren't. And if you think about anything we've done today, when you look at just technology in general, you start at the base layer, the infrastructure, and you work up to the top layer, the user interface. We're starting with the experiences of VR, AR. The infrastructure is being built. So that's what the next 5 years are, worked on, which is interacting platforms. MasterCard and Visa were formed because banks had to get together to talk to each other, and that would create the payment rails. Only in the last 20 to 40 years did that actually happen to life. So when it comes into the metaverse world, we need to build out those infrastructure layers first, and then the experiences will be formed. So what we're seeing today, and the use case we're seeing today are fun, but what we're going to see in 5 and 7 years, that's the real metaverse experience that our children of today will experience.
Yeah, Aaron,
One
didn't we?
final point. I'm sorry, just one final point. Most people don't know that MasterCard and Visa, he's correct. Visa changed the game with D Hop, the founder of Visa, because in the past there was only American Express, where you actually had a traveler's check, talking about circa early 40s, late 40s, 50s. But Visa came up and MasterCard, you could only use, like, so me and Tyler's lived in LA. You could only use the MasterCard in LA in a certain zone of Los Angeles. So if you went to Orange County, you could not use a MasterCard. And Visa came up with this syndicated model that said, or distributed model, almost like independent distributor, that if you have this Visa logo, we'll assure it, and any bank could use it. And that started our current credit system. This is economics. So it's interesting to Aaron's point. I just want to add that, like, sometimes we forget as humans how recent this stuff is, because we just think the credit system always existed, but it didn't. And it was very localized, extremely localized, until Visa kind of did that. And then MasterCard and American Express copied each other, as companies do. And then we have our current system.
Didn't we have yesterday the news about NVIDIA having built a chip for connecting the metaverse with smartphones. So this hardware producers have very long roadmaps. They cannot do it in some weeks or months, what they're doing. So in my point of view, it has been planned for many, many years. And the question is, what is your definition of the metaverse? Then you can say, I will forecast it for 230 or for 225. Because some people already use metaverse in a very broad sense, and for instance, are combining it with an NFT idea and creating an economy which needs that it is not allowed to be infinite, because if you have infinity, you cannot handle economic exchange so easily. And this was happening. I'm an old guy. Already in Second Life, and if someone has lived that through some years ago, there was a lot of hype, and we can learn from the debate we had at this time, and even from the debates we had in the early days, not of the internet, which is much older, but of the World Wide Web, when everyone realized that the internet is going from science to commerce. And then this trillion business of e-commerce emerged. And the same way, we will have a lot of complexity, and no one will decide which will be first, maturity of the hardware, maturity of the layers to connect it all, or the maturity of the culture. All will come together, and we can learn a lot of how the web has evolved. There was a lot of frustration by the people when they realized that now you have paywalls and so on. And again, the older know this, the younger even don't know the debates about paywalls. Yeah, so it's exactly the same, which will happen in the evolution of the metaverse, at least maybe even much more complexity of evolution, but we will have spaces with identity, without identity, and spaces with crimes, and spaces with law, and all this exactly like the web has evolved into, for instance, the Clubhouse, which is a microcosm already of the metaverse, only without the 3D and the NFT, because it's all about the people which are interacting, and we cannot handle a huge audience. For instance, only I'm speaking now because it's not possible to listen to 5 people at once. And the same problem of complexity overload will happen in the metaverse. Thank you. This was Billy.
Enjoyed those comments, and also I liked Aaron's framework for thinking about this world and also identification. And just a quick comment on the taxation. I think one point he was wrong on, and maybe there was another person who commented on this, that there is taxation now in the digital world in certain countries. I mean, I think in certain countries, if you're on the Brave browser and you're receiving tokens to look at certain ads, those are assets that some countries want to tax.
Okay, so just a few more headlines to jump through. Jeff G sent in this one from NPR. It says how SARS-CoV-2, aka COVID-19, in American white-tailed deer could alter the course of the global pandemic. Scientists have evidence that COVID is circulating in white-tailed deer in the U.S. They say the findings could essentially dash the hopes of eliminating it.
Oh yes, the lions in our Singapore Zoo also got it. My God, the Lion Kings.
And then Poppy found this one about Japanese startup working towards autonomous robots that could do useful work inside and outside the space station. The autonomous robotic arm finds success on the International Space Station. So these robotic arms are going everywhere. And a company called Standard AI acquires another company called Third Eye, and they've teamed up to bolster autonomous checkout tech at supermarkets, grocery stores. And that's booming itself, where you're going to make traditional supermarkets will become smart supermarkets, and they'll know everything that you're touching and looking at and everything else. And you won't need the cashiers anymore. And Poppy found this one from Forbes. Autonomous truck company called Kodiak Robotics announces major new funding. As if there weren't already an endless number of autonomous trucking companies. Autonomous trucking company Kodiak Robotics announced Wednesday it had raised $125 million. As if, I mean, that's the question is how many months before all the truckers are unemployed? There's your Tech News Jeopardy for today. How many months before all truckers are unemployed? The next generation of home robots will be more capable and more personable, according to the Washington Post. Tech titans and startups alike are working to deepen our relationship with their robots. Here's what we might have to look forward to or dread. Yes, and they show a robot. It's a cartoon, and in the cartoon they show a robot with a pizza, and all. It's coming in a very big way, and not slowly. Something we should all start thinking much more about. And last but not least, from Reuters, and thank you to who sent this in the DMs, a company called Cubeco, an award-winning waste converter developed by a chemical engineer in the Ivory Coast, is helping farmers in the Ivory Coast turn tons of agricultural byproducts into compost for their fields or gas for their cooking. I'm tweeting that out as we do to all the articles. And there they go. There go all the tweets. And of course, there was more that we will jump into when we meet next time, which will be in
5 hours and 20 minutes.
5 hour. Thank you, Cheryl. So we hope to see you there. And have a wonderful Subway sandwich break, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you,
Looking
Tyler.
forward
Thank
to
you.
Have a
you
great
tomorrow.
week.
Thanks, Tyler.
Bye.
Goodbye.